I want to first, I want to thank Savannah Technical College for having us here. I really appreciate the hospitality. I won't get on a big soapbox about tech schools, but I love what y'all do, and appreciate you guys having us here. Thank you very much. We're calling to order the House Study Committee on Gaming, and we're going to start with Chairman Stevens. If you don't mind, open us in a quick blessing.
Glad to. Let us pray. Most high and gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for the people that's come out. Please lead us and guide us in your ways. All these things we ask. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Robert Grant. You want to? We were going to offer you to make some. Go up there here. I think there's fine. I believe that's on.
Well, I was asked to just do a quick introduction, but we're amongst friends here.
Yeah.
And so we just want to welcome you guys and thank you for the shout out. And if we're here for anything, if you need us, let us know.
Thank you so much. Obviously, for those in the audience, we have some folks online, which you'll see throughout, but also join us. Senator Hickman, appreciate you coming over and seeing us. I appreciate you joining us. We're going to jump right into it, y'all. We're going to try to keep everything on track best we can. People have flights, and we have to get out of this room. And I want to make sure everybody has time to say their piece. First, we're going to have Damon Thayer come up. Sure.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having me today. I'm Damon Thayer from Georgetown, Kentucky, just north of Lexington. I know there's a big game coming up this weekend. I know there's a lot of anxiety here after what happened this weekend, but I think the Bulldogs playing the Wildcats will be the cure for what ails you. Matter of fact, I think if I could get my friend Representative Matt Hatchett to block for us, I think Senator Billy Hickman and I could probably score on the Kentucky defense. I'm a horse racing industry consultant. I am 9 months into retiring after 20 years in the Kentucky State Senate. I was Senate Majority Floor Leader for 12 years. My professional career was in the horse racing business. As a marketing and operations professional, I worked at racetracks in several states until settling in Kentucky back in 1992. I also worked at the Breeders' Cup. And then, you know how it happens, you get distracted by politics. But I'm back in the private sector now and happy to be here today. I am representing Georgia Racing and Entertainment, which is a group of Georgia investors who are prepared to invest in horse racing, in the horse racing industry, if it becomes legal here in your state. I believe that Georgia is one of the last great frontiers in North America for horse racing. I think your population and demography and geography and agriculture background would make this a huge state for horse racing, and it would be a huge benefit for your economy. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done in Kentucky. During my last 4 years in the Kentucky State Senate, we passed 5 bills to help stabilize the Kentucky horse racing and breeding industry and put it on a trajectory where it is currently the best year-round horse racing circuit in North America. And tops in market share when it comes to the breeding side as well. We've taken an aggressive stance towards promoting the horse industry by levying reasonable tax rates on wagering and establishing targeted incentive funds to help the business grow. The result has been a strengthening of racing, breeding, and tourism for one of our 2 signature industries, horses and bourbon. Representative Stevens knew exactly what the other one was. Matter of fact, in 2022, the Kentucky Equine Survey was conducted by the University of Kentucky and published last year, and it calculated that the economic impact of the horse industry in Kentucky is $6.5 billion a year with an estimated 60,500 jobs. It also notes that the agriculture of jobs promotes the retention of green space and the preservation of farmland. As a matter of fact, the survey said that equine operations account for over 900,000 acres in Kentucky. Of course, racing has a long history in the Commonwealth, dating back to the 1700s, and of course, the Kentucky Derby, which has now been run in Louisville at Churchill Downs for 151 years. Over the years, there have been numerous bills passed into law, but I think the most notable were two of the five that I mentioned in my earlier remarks. In 2021, with my friend Representative Adam Koenig, who's going to speak to you later, the Kentucky General Assembly passed legislation amending the statutes to define parimutuel wagering to assure the legality of historical horse racing machines, or HHR. And then the following year, after a year-long task force that Representative Koenig and I co-chaired, the General Assembly passed a comprehensive racing bill modifying and simplifying the taxes paid on parimutuel wagering, and the results have been nothing short of extraordinary. On-track and simulcast handle is now shifting towards the convenience of advanced deposit wagering, which is betting on your phone, on a FanDuel, for example, and the desirability of HHR. It's wildly popular, and it is pushing our purse levels and our development fund levels to record amounts. The state of Kentucky is also greatly benefited. As legislators, you want to know how an industry is going to affect your general fund. In 2015, we were generating about $3 million a year for the general fund. 10 years later, and it's $76 million into the general fund and growing because of the introduction of historical horse racing machines at racetracks and off-track betting locations around the Commonwealth. We're in the introductory and growth phase of that, and the benefits to the general fund are tremendous. In addition to the direct revenue generated by wagering, all of the taxes generated by increased employment, industry support businesses, tourism have also contributed to Kentucky's rising economy. So I share this with all of you as you consider the future of gaming here in Georgia, because we've shown in Kentucky that the equine industry can promote agribusiness, tourism, and having a strong regulatory structure is important as well. We think we're an excellent example, probably the best example in the country, of what the horse industry can look like and how the horse racing and breeding ecosystem can thrive if it's set up correctly. Now, I know that there's also talk about perhaps kicking things off here with the expansion of steeplechase racing, which of course has a long history here in Georgia. Steeplechase racing has been conducted in some form here since the first Atlanta steeplechase in 1966. It has a rich history of quality events, sponsorship, and entertainment. And the company I represent, Georgia Racing and Entertainment, seeks to add and surpass to this legacy by conducting high-quality steeplechase racing in this state. It would bring more national recognition to Georgia and add to your already impressive list of premier sporting events. I believe that Georgia is positioned to immediately take its place among the top steeplechase states in America, and eventually flat racing like we see at our 5 thoroughbred tracks in Kentucky. You could use this steeplechase legislation as a springboard for growth. It would be beneficial to the entire state and local communities where these racing venues might be located. I'd also like to point out that if horse racing is included in any gaming bill, it will be the only form of gaming that's going to have a positive effect on rural Georgia. It's going to increase the preservation of farmland and green space and the agribusiness that's so important to Georgia's economy. We see it throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Like I said, 900,000 acres are committed to raising and breeding and the pre-training of racehorses, as well as growing the grain and the hay that feeds the horses and the straw that they're bedded on. And I think Georgia, with your population and your tremendous emphasis that you put on rural Georgia that bringing any form of horse race betting to the Peach State is going to be an out-of-the-ballpark home run. So that's all I have today. I know the chairman wants to keep things moving, and I really appreciate the opportunity to address you. It's good to see my friend Representative Matt Hatchett. We've known each other for years from when we were both on the GOPAC board together, and my good friend Senator Billy Hickman came out today, and I'm really glad to see these great relations between the House and Senate. Always good to see. So I'm open to any questions that you or your members might have for me, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Any members online have any?
Yes.
Chairman Powell.
I'm sorry, I can't find the button to be recognized, but thank you anyway. Senator, good to have you visit down here in Georgia from Kentucky.
Mr. Chairman, it's good to see you, and I appreciate the opportunity and all the good work you've done as the chairman of your committee.
Well, thank you. Been active in this issue for several years. Refresh my memory on horse racing in the South. Every state has the states that do have horse racing right now, they do it like in cycles, like I don't know how many weeks it is, but it moves from Kentucky to another state to Florida. Is that correct?
Yes, there is circuit. We have a year-round circuit in Kentucky, but a good number of our horsemen will go south for the winter, and they'll go to Hot Springs, Arkansas. They have a meet there that runs from late December to the 1st of May. There's a big meet in New Orleans at Fairgrounds Racecourse, and also Tampa Bay Downs in Florida and Gulfstream Park near Miami would be the big tracks during the winter time in the South. But as I mentioned before, with the increases in purses that we're seeing in Kentucky, a lot of these big-name trainers are leaving a string of horses in Kentucky during the winter. We have a track in northern Kentucky where I used to work called Turfway Park, and we have a synthetic racing surface so that we can race in the wintertime, and we race there December, January, February, March, and the purses are getting so lucrative that the best horsemen in the country, while they may take some to the south during the winter months, they will leave a big string at Turfway to race there as well. Excuse me.
Yeah. Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Yes. I guess my question was if the people of Georgia, and if it goes on the ballot and they allow gaming, which would be the pari-mutuel, which would be the big thing for horse racing, what would be the appropriate season that horse racing would be available for the state of Georgia?
That's a really good question, Mr. Chairman, because you want to fit into a circuit, because in order to run a race meet, you have to have an appropriate number of horses to make sure you've got enough to run a season. You could either try to fit into a southern circuit or in what we call the Mid-Atlantic. There's a circuit brewing now between Maryland and Virginia, and I think Georgia could fit nicely in that. It's nicely placed between the tracks in the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic and Florida. So I would say probably either like a late summer, early fall meet, or because of your temperate climate here, depending on which part of the state, we could also probably race in the wintertime here, especially with the advent of synthetic racing surfaces. That's improved the quality of racing in the wintertime, because you don't get the muddy tracks, because synthetic surfaces don't freeze, they don't get muddy when it rains, so you don't have to cancel as many days. That's what we found at Turfway Park up in northern Kentucky, right next. If you've ever flown into the Cincinnati airport, which is actually in Kentucky, you fly right over Turfway Park and that's our wintertime track with the synthetic surface. So I think, Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. And I think because of the temperate climate here, there are different times of the year that would work well. And we would have to work with people in other states, with horsemen and their representatives from other states to create a niche for Georgia racing. But I think if you do it right here, you're going to have the purses that would attract horses. And it's like the movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. I know, my clients and the investors in Georgia Racing and Entertainment are interested in building a showplace facility that would be internationally acceptable. I mean, you have great sports venues in Georgia, and the folks at Georgia Racing and Entertainment would want to make sure that our standards would be up to the other facilities that you have throughout Georgia. And we think if you structure the legislation properly, that the purses here, because of the population you have, would be huge, and horsemen would change their schedule because people follow the money.
Further question, please. In regard to our surrounding states, we've got Alabama to the west, South Carolina to the east, North Carolina northeast, and of course Tennessee directly north. How do they handle horse racing? Do they have horse racing events in those states that border Georgia?
Not at present. Let me go through that list, Mr. Chairman. In Alabama, horse racing is legal, but for a variety of regulatory and market-based factors, they haven't raced at the Birmingham race course in probably 25 years. So I know there are people trying to bring racing back to Alabama. That track in Birmingham is quite nice, but I don't know that they're making great progress. Tennessee, there's no active effort. There's no horse racing there. They do have a steeplechase in Nashville that's quite popular, a non-betting event like the Atlanta steeplechase. And there's no brick and mortar retail gaming of any sort in Tennessee. They have a lottery and they have online sports betting, but no brick and mortar or retail. South Carolina, same. There's no horse racing there, although there are very good training centers in Camden and Aiken. There's no pari-mutuel wagering there, and I would predict that nothing's really happening there. In North Carolina, we're doing some work there as well. 2 years ago, North Carolina legalized horse racing in its sports betting bill, but there still remains further work to be done on passing legislation on the structure, the license the requirements, the tax rates, et cetera. So of those states you named, Mr. Chairman, I would say North Carolina is the one that could come online very soon, depending on future actions of the legislature in North Carolina. But those other states, there's really nothing really moving right now.
Very good. So I think you've accurately answered my question that if the citizens of Georgia do allow for pari-mutuel and other forms of gaming, then we would possibly have horse tracks, and it would be open to those other surrounding states, that Georgia could be a captive state for this sporting entertainment.
You're spot on, Mr. Chairman. Actually, two of our most successful tracks in Kentucky are on the Kentucky-Tennessee border. Kentucky Downs in Franklin is literally on exit 2 on I-65. You can watch a horse race and look to the south and see Tennessee, and about 65% of the attendees at Kentucky Downs come from the Robertson County market, which is Nashville. And then a little further to the west, there's a harness track called Oak Grove, and it's right near the Fort Campbell military base, which straddles Kentucky and Tennessee, and it gets a lot of its patrons from Clarksville, Tennessee as well. And then we also, on I-75 in Williamsburg, we have an OTB, we call it a track extension. They have simulcasting, sports betting, historical racing machines, a restaurant, and it gets a lot of its customer base from Knoxville, Tennessee. So there's no doubt that if you have locations that are what I would call border locations with other states, you're not only going to draw Georgians to your facilities, but you're also going to attract people from surrounding states.
Very good. Thank you for taking your time to come down. Since Georgia, our biggest industry in the state is agriculture, this would fit nicely into our agricultural community. Thank you so much for taking your time, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Anytime. I'm always happy to come down.
Any other questions? Mr. Thayer, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate your time and attention today.
Before I move on, I should have mentioned either microphone, you want to go to the podium, you want to stand here, either one is perfectly fine with us. Adam Honig.
We're getting the PowerPoint help.
Yeah, we don't have to watch Alan smoking his cigar. Yay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for having me here. It's exciting to, I've certainly testified plenty of times in Kentucky, but I've never testified before a legislative committee outside of Kentucky, so this is an honor and a privilege, and I appreciate it. As Senator Thayer probably mentioned, or I know he mentioned because I was sitting there, we worked together quite a bit on parimutuel issues in our time together in the legislature. I spent 16 years in the Kentucky House, the last 6 of which were chairing what we call Licensing and Occupations Committee, which sounds like the Regulated Industries Committee that you all have here in Georgia, where if you have a license to do anything in Kentucky, that comes through our committee, and that meant that all things, both gaming and alcohol, came through the committee, so I had the best job in town. That's what I had to focus on, you know. Damon, in his role as floor leader, had to deal with, you know, all those icky other issues. I got to deal with the fun stuff. So I was able to do a deep dive into a lot of these issues, and I can say that, as he mentioned, we worked on our parimutuel overhaul bill in 2022, which I had to be chairman or the sponsor of because it had to start in the House because it dealt with revenue. But we worked closely together on that. I handled the HHR bill in 2021 on the House floor, and I was also the sports betting author for what passed eventually. I was there. I ran it for 4 years, and I left the legislature, and by gosh, they passed it right after I left. So I don't get to claim to be the sponsor, but I do claim to be the godfather of sports betting in Kentucky. So we're going to talk about both those issues a little bit. I was asked to come and kind of get into the weeds a little bit. I know I've met Representative Williams at plenty of Nickel G's conferences, so he is well versed on all these things, but I appreciate you letting this outsider come and talk a little bit. So I'm going to hit it off with parimutuel wagering. It's an interesting history that obviously, as you see, goes back to the late 1800s in France, that allows gamblers or investors, you might even say, in the results of horse races to bet against each other, with the house taking a piece of the action to put on the show. It obviously became very popular in Europe. It made its way over here in North America for use in horse racing. And as I mentioned, the bettors wager into a pool. Payouts are determined by the amount of money wagered on each horse in each race and for each type of bet there is. And the odds fluctuate until betting closes, unlike fixed odds wagering. Parimutuel wagering made its way to America a century ago, and one thing that we worked on with the parimutuel reform is taking what turned out to be well over 100-year-old parimutuel laws and turning them into laws that reflect 21st century life. When you started, you could just bet a horse to win. And imagine a world where there were no computers and somebody comes up and wants to bet $2 on a horse, and you've got all these ticket takers. I mean, it was the most popular sport to go to. Tracks would regularly get more people to go there than they would go to a Yankees game or a Red Sox game, because you had a little extra fun with the wagering. So, you know, they're taking all this money, they're putting it in the back, and somebody's counting it up and as quickly as they can so they can figure out what they owe people when the race is over. Obviously, with the advent of computers and much other technology, there's a wide range of other bets that can be utilized, and that is under the purview of either the legislature or any power given back to a racing commission per se, or a general gaming commission to determine which ones are appropriate and which ones are not appropriate. And then there's the newest addition that we have, which is historical horse racing machines, which we will get into a little bit later. Senator Thayer talked about the jobs, and this is a slide from our Kentucky Equine Education Project that has done a terrific job in keeping people and legislators informed as to the economic benefits of horse racing in Kentucky. You can go on their website and steal lists from them. They'd be happy to share. But you can see the one horse has all these different folks who work to maintain it. Obviously, they work to maintain a wide range of horses. Each farrier doesn't just belong to one horse, but it employs really a ton of people. And I mean, yeah, I mean, you've even got feed and bedding dealer up there. I mean, it is a lot of people, many of whom are paid quite well to maintain these horses. So that is a pretty good representation of the jobs available for the rural areas and the ones that will be working at the track. So let's be optimistic and say you pass something soon. What are some of the many issues that you have to address? And I went straight to licensure first, which is not sexy, not interesting, but very necessary. There's a lot of people that work on the track. And it's easy to think of the trainers and the jockeys, but the mutual clerks, anyone that goes to the backside as a vendor. I should have started with this, but one of my jobs now that I've left the legislature is being executive director of the Kentucky Quarter Horse Racing Association. So I have to be licensed, and I'm a licensed vendor. But you spend any time, part of your day at the track, if you're one of these people on this slide, typically you need to be licensed. Obviously, there's fees that go along with that. There's background checks because it's still gaming, so you want people who don't have bad records, maybe to do certain jobs. Next, safety of horses and the people, and I put HISA in parentheses because if you're going to run thoroughbreds, you have to deal with the HISA laws that the federal government passed, which is Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act. And so you're going to have to work in tandem with them. For other racing like standardbreds, quarter horses, we are not under HISA's purview as of yet, and we hope to keep it that way. I'm sure like many of you here, we think the states have the better way of doing things and would like to keep that power here as much as possible. But you also have, issues of safety, maintaining the horses. Obviously, we have had a bunch of issues over the past several years, bad press with some unfortunate breakdowns of horses. And, you know, people like to talk about the social license of being allowed to run horses. And we need to do our best to maintain that and make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure our equine athletes are staying healthy and that, you know, our jockeys are healthy as well, that they're being properly cared for. Then comes the wagering. A tote company is, and all these, pretty much most of these folks have to be licensed. Tote companies are the ones that show you the odds on the board in the middle of the track. I think there's 3 or 4 of them that compete for business. ADWs, which are called Advanced Deposit Wagering entities, they're the apps that allow you to wager off track from your home, from your car, wherever you may be on a horse race. Common ones are Twin Spires, First Bet, Naira, and so they are, what, 90% of the wagers probably nationwide are on ADWs, so it's a very important item, and I would encourage you to, obviously, when you deal with that, encourage as many folks as possible to come. I may have been in New Jersey over the weekend and had to use a workaround to make a couple of wagers, specifically on Senator Thayer's horse on Sunday, because they only give you the option of one ADW to use, and I do not have that ADW, and so, you know, I think we all believe competition is good, so I would encourage you to consider that. Simulcasting, which is where you go to another track. You go to a track and bet on a different track. And those are, you know, those live under a different set of rules, so we have to deal with that. Breakage, which is a personal favorite of mine as someone who likes to wager an awful lot. If you're familiar with horse racing, most states, the results come in and you get paid $6.20, $6.40, $6.60. They come in 20-cent increments. And I'm proud to say that thanks to the work that Senator Thayer and I did, we were the first state to have the state break it down to the penny for every dollar you bet. So instead of getting paid $6.40 or $6.60, you get paid $6.40, $6.42, $6.44, $6.46, $6.48, all the way up. A reflection of what you actually deserve as a bettor. And, you know, some people say, well, it's only 2 cents. And for some people, if you bet enough, well, that turns into actual money. So, and it's taking care of the bettors. There are three legs to the stool. The track is putting on the show, the horsemen that bring the horses to race, and the bettors. And usually the bettors are the last one to get taken care of. So hopefully you will keep them in mind. And then discussion of whether or not fixed odds would be appropriate for you all. It's very common in other countries that you get to bet fixed odds, which means it's not pari-mutuel. And given what I've heard about the Constitution, may be an additional hurdle to make that happen, because it's the difference between betting against each other and betting against the house. You need a regulator. In Kentucky, for a long time, we had a racing commission, which we still have, but it's now a racing and gaming corporation. We've added sports betting to it. We've added charitable gaming to it in the last few years. You know, a lot of places just have their own horse racing commission. States like Pennsylvania have all the gaming under one roof, so you have to figure out what you think will work best for you. And then how are you going to fund purses? We're at a point where if you want to be successful, it's very difficult to achieve that without historical horse racing machines. They are closing tracks all over the country, and I think it's safe to say no track that has historical horse racing has shut down. And with the exception of one track in Nebraska that has a casino that funds their purses, every other track that's being built in America is being built on historical horse racing machines. So that is very, very important to having a successful meet that Georgians can be proud of. As I mentioned, the mother's milk of purses, and boy, I stole all my thunder from that slide. So I want to hit a little bit on sports betting. Mr. Chairman, you want me to do that now, or you want me to hold off for pari-mutuel?
Actually, if we do have questions for pari-mutuel,
Okay.
let's go ahead and hit those now. Anyone online?
Can you hear me? I'm like Alan. I'm trying to get my hand up.
All right. Rep.
Can you
Williams.
hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Good to see you, Senator. I apologize for not being there, but let me thank you for the hospitality you displayed in Louisville in July, and good to have you in Georgia.
Yes, sir. We appreciate you coming.
Quick question. This might have been discussed previously, and I missed it. The total revenue in Kentucky from horse racing, and what is the taxing percent for Kentucky?
The tax on every pari-mutuel wager, whether it's historical horse racing or on a live horse race or simulcast, is 1.5%. Now that money is split up in many ways. A lot of it, I shouldn't say a lot of it, a good portion of it goes to breeders' incentive funds. It goes to like the Thoroughbred KTDF, Kentucky Thoroughbred Development Fund, and then the Standardbred Development Fund and the Quarter Horse Development Fund, which goes to the purses, and which also goes to incentivizing people to breed their horses in Kentucky. And those breeders can, even if the horse it's a Kentucky bred, but it wins a stakes race in California or Florida or wherever, they can get some additional monies, even if they don't own the horse anymore. They'll get some money for breeding that. We also fund University of Louisville Thoroughbred program and Bluegrass Technical College, which are training the next generation of workers. I think there's a backside improvement fund that comes out of there, and another thing or two that I'm not thinking of, but Senator Thayer might remind me here in a little bit. But 1.5% of gross. So for every dollar, 1.5 cents come out in taxes, no matter what.
Okay. A follow-up here, please, sir.
Go ahead.
Now, of course, if the citizens of Georgia approve pari-mutuel in Georgia, there'll certainly be some questions. I know the bad publicity that you kind of referred to when you started. Tell us what Kentucky did to quiet the waters or to make improvements. What did you do about some of the problems the entire industry was experiencing?
I think it's safe to say that, first of all, we have the strongest testing policy in America. We make sure that our horses are running clean, and that's very important. As Senator Thayer mentioned, we have a Tapeta track in northern Kentucky, which is where I'm from, and there tends to be fewer injuries for horses running on that surface. We have very, very active, we have a place called Old Friends, which is where retired horses can go. We have a wide range of private, nonprofit entities that repurpose, retrain thoroughbreds in Kentucky that so that they're not pushed to run too much. There's some place for them to go if they're maybe not as fast or have an injury that gives their owners some place to go, that they don't have to continue to to pay that cost, but they can find that horse a second career. And for the nation, I believe the stats are those catastrophic events have been cut in half in the last 10 years, and I think maybe the 20 years before that they were cut before that. So those events are always being researched. There's always new products coming out to try to see what can be done with that. I may even be involved in trying to raise some money for one of those type of products that will hopefully improve horse health long term. So it's an ongoing issue, and I'd like to tell you it's going to get to zero, and that's our goal. That's unlikely, but we're going to keep striving for it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Anything, if there's nothing else, I'll talk, there's somebody waiting to get in the room there.
Mr. Chairman?
Was that Alan?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, go ahead, Chairman Powell.
I'm sorry. I can't find the wave button on this Zoom in here, so I just have to interrupt, and I appreciate that. Senator, it's good to have a second senator from the great state of Kentucky and Georgia, and that's something I hardly ever say about a senator, former senators, or current senators.
Well, you'll like to know that I was a former House member, so I don't want to be demoted or anything like that.
How many tracks do y'all have in Kentucky?
I'm sorry?
How many tracks do y'all have open in Kentucky?
We have 8, and our
And I
quarter horse
presume they
track
all
is
run at
about to be
different,
9.
they're all on different schedules, because I know that the only two that I'm really familiar with is Churchill and Keeneland.
Yes, sir.
But do they run on different cycles?
There's someone running at every point in the year. Up by me in Turfway, they run basically beginning of December through the end of March. Then we move to Keeneland for April. Obviously Churchill for May and June. July and August we go to Ellis. Then we go to Kentucky Downs for the first half of September. We go to Churchill for the second half of September. They just finished their September meet yesterday. Keeneland in October. And then we go back to Churchill for the last week of October through November. And we're back at Turfway. So that's the thoroughbreds. I don't think we have a year-round standard bred, but I want to say it's about 8 months between 3 different tracks. What was already mentioned, Oak Grove down by Fort Campbell in western Kentucky, Red Mile, which I believe had its 150th anniversary of their first race yesterday in Lexington, and then there's a new track in Corbin that doesn't run as much. They're new, so they're building. They're like a startup, but I think they run for maybe 3-4 weeks. And then my quarter horse track is going to be starting next year in Ashland, and right now we're looking at running there in August for hopefully 3 weeks.
And the historical, even when they're not running live horses, all of them are open to do the historical racing?
Yes, sir. Those are year-round operations, and
Very good.
each track is permitted 1 on site. Churchill's allowed to not have theirs on site. And then they're allowed 1 track extension, and all that's within a 50-mile radius.
And could you give us a guesstimation on the dollar amount of revenue that goes into the state coffers? I had heard earlier you were talking about how many different pots went to different fields and all that, but at the end of the day, can you give us a guesstimation on what the revenue for the state of Kentucky is off of this?
Into the general fund, I believe, is $76 million, and it's going up. This year is the first year that we are going to hit $10 billion in revenue on historical horse racing machines, we've got some good things going. There's probably going to be a couple more historical horse racing machine facilities open in the next couple of years. So it's gonna keep going up.
Is a 1.5% that y'all put on the tax, is that average for the nationwide, or is that just is that on the low end because Kentucky is historically noted for horse racing?
I don't know what other states tax that number, but I will be happy to get that information to Brian.
Yeah, I have an interest in that. I mean, I know that in the gaming industry, you know, it all goes into one pot, and it's basically will go to some other cause, whatever the will of the General Assembly if passed. And I just wonder if that 1.5%, if that's on the low end nationally, or what it could reflect.
Yes, and we try to keep things fair and low. 33% of net is what that comes to, according to Senator Thayer.
Thank you, Senator.
All right, and to keep this on time, we will move on to some issues for you all to consider if you go sports betting. Obviously, it's caught on quite well since the overturning of PASPA in, I believe, 2019, legal in 38 states, D.C. and Puerto Rico. I guess this is an issue to consider as much as a push, which is we know it's going on in every part of the country, and to protect people. If you legalize it, what you're doing is protecting people rather than pushing them offshore into illegal markets, encouraging them to use a VPN to go around it, encouraging them to text their buddy in a state where it's legal and say, give me $20 on the dogs to win outright, whatever it may be. You know, you're at some point, if you're using an offshore account and you're successful, you may get your money, you may not. And this is a means of protecting the population, making sure that they're not using a bookie, who you know won't cut you off like some of these, like some of the apps will, because they don't want to, you know, necessarily create problem gamblers. You know, with these apps, they will give you the opportunity and say, hey, would you like to have a limit? And you can put in a limit, and they will cut you off at that point. Bookies and offshore accounts will not do that. So it's another manner of protection. Obviously, the licensure is important, and you got to think about not just the upfront cost to get the license, but the tax rate. There's wide ranges to go on licensure. We focused on generating enough money with the initial licensure to regulate it, not to make money. There are other states, and I think I'm going to pick on Pennsylvania, who to just enter the market was $20 million. That's just a money-making opportunity, and that seemed excessive. When it came to tax rate, I was not shy in Kentucky about stealing New Jersey's tax rate. They were the first ones to market. They, I think, did a pretty good job, and so I just flat out stole their rate, which is 9 3/4 if you do it in person, and 13 1/4. 13 1/4 if you do it on the app. And the idea behind that is, for them and for us, get your people, give them an opportunity to go into a track, go to the HHR machines while they're there, see some horse racing if you're one of the few Kentuckians that haven't yet, and expose them to that. So we want to encourage them to go to the track and do it in person. What's going to be legal? Just college, or just pros or college? Are you going to allow in-game wagers where you can, you know, bet on the second half winner or the second half spread? in a football game or a basketball game. And then there's prop bets, which, you know, is something that has turned out to be fairly controversial. You know, a certain player to score 2 touchdowns, or a certain basketball player to be over or under 10 points, whatever it may be. What are you going to do with advertising? Massachusetts is very active in regulating advertising and what you can and can't say and how often you can and can't do it. So that is certainly something that you should address. I put shutting off customers, which is not the best way of putting that, but I made sure that we allowed for people to put themselves on self-exclusion lists with the HHR machines, as well as with the sports betting, and say, just don't let me do anything for the next 6 months or the next year, or whatever it is. And then, of course, problem gaming, which, you know, exists, and there's no way to say otherwise. But the numbers, and Representative Williams, we've all heard these at Nickel G's, that you're looking at 1% to 2% of the people that have a serious problem. And I think it's incumbent upon us to address that as best we can. And we have, I believe, 5% of the state's sports betting revenues in Kentucky going to problem gaming, and that's a good start. We went from 0 to that. We need to do more, and I know there are other members looking at doing that. So, any questions on the sports betting? I'm sorry if I've gone too long, Mr. Chairman.
I think we started a little behind anyway, so you're all right. As far as politically speaking, how did it pass, temperature, primary, challengers?
Not only did no one lose a seat over over sports betting or historical horse racing machines, I really don't think it even became an issue in any races. You know, look, we're Kentucky. We have horse racing for a long time, so it's a little more ingrained. And when I was trying to round up votes for these issues and talking to some of the rural legislators, I'd ask them, so who's the bookie in this county? And they knew who the bookies were in their district. So, you know, it's out there. People know it's out there, and maybe the situation's the same here in Georgia, whether you know who your bookies are in your district or not. But I think we all know that it is happening, and let's bring it out of the shadows and treat adults like adults. And I would encourage you to see if you can find anyone in the country. I mean, 38 states. It's a bipartisan issue. Have you find someone in the country who's lost an election over this? Because I don't think they exist.
Any other questions? Senator.
Yes, sir. I don't know, just a general information statement. On the Republican ballot last year, I guess it was, and we all know this, there was a question that said, would you support the people of Georgia having the right to vote on gaming in Georgia? And out of 159 counties in Georgia, 158 of those counties voted. Over 80% of the Republican people said they want the right to vote on gaming in Georgia. The only county that was less than 80% was a county that I have a hard time pronouncing the name. It's like Teleferro County up around Augusta, and it was like 79%. So I think the people in Georgia have spoken that they won't have the right to vote on this in Georgia. And then the next thing I would like to say, would you, I don't know a whole lot about fixed odds betting, but the more I've read about it, the more I've seen about it, I think I like it better because it ties in closer with the sports betting side of things. And I know from a personal standpoint, I've learned more about it a couple of years ago. We had a horse running down at Gulfstream, and when I went to the window and bet on our horse, the horse was 7-1, and the horse won going away. And when I went to collect my money at the window, the odds it went off at 3-2. So all that money that I was expecting to get out the window, I didn't get it. So that really taught me a little bit more about fixed odds betting. And I really think in Georgia, because of the sports side of it and being fixed, that a fixed odds bet and when the horse would really get a lot of the gaming people also the bet more on the horse racing side too.
I appreciate that, and I would like to, see more of it. I will give two sides of that coin, if I may. One is it's a whole lot harder to fund purses with just fixed odds wagering. I think it would be great to have an option. Maybe it would be a great option to, if you go physically to the track, you can bet on fixed odds, and that way you're giving people another incentive to actually go to the track. On the flip side, I also think it's necessary because the kids growing up today, I say kids, but the young people growing up today are used to sports betting. They're quickly getting used to sports betting and the fixed odds associated with it. And it doesn't register with them when they make a bet and that their odds can change after they put in a number. Or they go and get 7-1 when they make the bet. So I think it's, but we're all smart people. We can figure out how to fund purses and make that happen.
No, I totally agree with that concept. I mean, also, maybe you misunderstood, but I do understand that we have to have some type of historic race machines to support the industry. No question about that.
All right, well, any other questions? Thank you so much. I really appreciate
Thank
your
you.
attendance.
I appreciate it.
All right, moving into Dr. Brad Humphreys. A few minutes behind schedule. Let's see if we can catch up. I believe he is online.
I'll do what I can.
Thank you so much, and I don't mean to pressure you there, but appreciate it.
So I've got some slides. I don't know if somebody can make me the co-host or just allow me to
I think we're
share my screen.
working on that currently.
Let's see. Okay, can everybody see that?
We got you.
Are we good?
We're good.
Okay, well, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you folks who are thinking about expanding gambling opportunities in Georgia. I'm Brad Humphreys, and I'm a professor of economics at West Virginia University, and I'm the director of the Center for Gaming Research and Development here at the university. I previously held a position that was the chair in the economics of gambling at the University of Alberta in Canada. I've been doing research on the economics of gambling markets for about 20 years now. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is just a brief overview of some research, published research from peer-reviewed academic journals that would address some of the issues that you could potentially be thinking about right now. So I'm from West Virginia, and let me just give you a little idea about the legal gambling that's available in West Virginia. We have a lot of verticals, as many of the people in the industry like to call it, that is different forms of gambling. And this is just the most recent, the regulator of gambling in West Virginia is the West Virginia Lottery Corporation. This will give you an idea of the fiscal year 2025 revenues from each one of these types of gambling. So we've got the standard lottery, which is all that's legal in Georgia at this point, as I understand it. We've got scratch-off lottery. We have started a mobile lottery platform in West Virginia where you can have digital scratch-offs. VOTs, we've got them at racetracks, and we've got them at standalone brick-and-mortar locations around the state. Both of those VOTs have been in place since 2024. We've got 5 casinos, and we have table game gambling at those casinos. We have sports betting at those casinos. And then, one of the casinos is the Greenbrier Hotel Casino, which is a separate category in legal terms. And then in 2020, we started iGaming, which is, casino gambling on a mobile device. So you can see from the sources of revenues here that it's really all VOTs. And that's where the state of West Virginia is generating most of the gambling revenues. And of course, these are taxed. But that's the, 75% of the gambling in West Virginia is at these VLTs. And then also iGaming is pretty popular, but really that's only about 3% of our gambling. So that's what we offer, and that's what's going on. So the first thing I was asked to talk about is to discuss the literature on whether there is substitution, or what people in the industry call cannibalization, right? So really this is the question of, does the introduction of some new type of gambling, what's the impact it has on this market, on these markets? Does it lead existing participants in those markets, people who are now buying lottery tickets in Georgia, to switch away from lottery tickets and start gambling in the new market? That would be substitution to an economist, or cannibalization. Or is it possible that the adoption of a new type of gambling in a state would induce people who were not previously gamblers to participate in that market? So that would, depending on how much of each of those happens, that would affect tax revenues coming out of this. So there is some past research that is focused on the introduction of sort of new forms of gambling in states as a natural experiment, where you can compare what happened in that state before and after. So here's some of the results that are out there in the literature. So in Pennsylvania, there's a paper that shows that the legalization of sports betting increased table game revenues at casinos. So there's some sort of spillover effect that evidence suggests. This paper from West Virginia is one of my papers. My paper found that legalization of sports betting reduced other casino revenues. There's a paper that looks at lottery in New York, and the legalization of sports betting there, that paper concludes reduced lottery sales. And then there's a sort of interesting paper that looks at the legalization of sports betting in Illinois, which borders Missouri, which also has casino gambling. So that paper finds that the legalization of sports betting increased casino revenues in Illinois casinos and decreased them in Missouri, so people were crossing the border. So I've got one more paper I want to talk about. Actually, there's a new paper that's just been out that looked at 7 different states, and they found that retail sports betting legalization in those states was associated with increased casino revenues, but mobile sports betting looks like it decreased casino revenues. So I would call the evidence about cannibalization or substitution mixed. I don't see any consistency in that literature, so it's difficult to make a sort of forecast about, if you decide to legalize another form of gambling, what might happen there. I do want to say this about substitution and what gambling is currently going on. Let me echo the previous speaker's point that we know that there are substantial gray or black market gambling sites that exist. These online offshore bookmakers are out there. Many people in Georgia, many residents, are currently betting on sports, even though it's not technically legal. So an important consideration when thinking about legalization of sports betting is, to bring those people who are clearly betting in sports, because people love to bet on sports, to bring them into the fold and provide consumer protection, and also capture some tax revenues from that. There's also another important factor that I believe somebody's going to talk about today, is there are these prediction markets like Kalshi that are becoming increasingly popular. And that, although there's some debate about whether that is gambling that needs to be regulated or not, those options are out there, and those markets look a lot like a sports bet offered by a bookmaker, and people have access to that nationwide. And then clearly these cross-border effects exist, and they're important, and that means Georgians are currently traveling to other states to gamble because of the lack of gambling opportunities, including sports betting in the state. Okay, so I was also asked to talk a little bit about the research of who bets on sports. If you look at the characteristics of sports bettors, I've written a couple of papers about this. It's primarily young men. who like to bet on sports. When you look at the data from West Virginia, which I have access to, most of the wagering occurs through mobile devices in terms of sports betting. The brick and mortar casino sports betting is a tiny fraction of what gets bet online. 90% of the bets are parlay bets. For those that don't understand that, it's a parlay bet would be a bet that would only pay off if more than two or more events actually occur. And the attractiveness of parlay bets is it can get the odds up very high because the overall payout on a parlay bet depends on the individual odds on each leg of that parlay or each action or outcome that's being bet on. So you can get, very high odds on parlay bets with many legs, and that's really popular. However, I'll just point out that we don't know very much at all about what sort of odds that bookmakers are offering on these parlay bets. And in particular, they could be quite unfavorable to the bettors in these markets. There's just a lack of research there. And then as another clear feature of these markets is that these proposition bets, many times on individual athletes, are also very common as part of the legs of a parlay bet. So casinos, brick and mortar casinos, I was also asked to talk about the existing research on this. I've done some research on this as well, mostly from Canada when I was up there at the University of Alberta. But I've got this paper that shows that looks at new casinos that open in Canada compared to areas with existing casinos and areas without casinos. There was a lot of jobs created. I mean, there's no doubt, I think, in my evidence that opening a new brick and mortar casino is going to create a lot of jobs. And many of those are high-paying jobs. So, yeah, I think the evidence suggests that is an effective economic development policy. There's also evidence from this paper that there's spillovers limited to employment in other local industries. Basically, the result in this paper is there are 1 to 2 additional hospitality industry jobs created for every new gambling job. So it will help to increase have a positive effect on the labor market near these casinos. I had another paper, again, using data, a little bit older data in Canada from 1986 to 2007. We look at some broader economic outcomes. There's no evidence that these casino openings spurred population growth, so people aren't moving in because into those areas because there's a casino there. And it didn't look like it affected income, the age composition, gender composition, marital status, and home ownership rates in those areas. There is some evidence in that paper of negative effects of a new casino on housing values and rents. And that's probably because there's a lot of foot traffic and a lot of vehicle traffic that comes into these casinos. And we know that those things, congestion and things like that, do tend to reduce property values. So the impact there is a little bit mixed. There's also a really interesting new paper that was just published this year that looks at new urban casino openings in Pennsylvania, in Des Plaines, Illinois, which is outside Chicago, in Washington, D.C., Cleveland, Philadelphia, and Pittsburgh. They have evidence there that there's certainly a very localized, very close to the casino employment gains, but they don't extend much beyond those casinos. And they also find, this paper also finds that there's spillover effects in terms of opening a casino is also going to generate jobs in the hospitality sector. But again, it's quite localized in these are urban casinos. So this would be the equivalent of, say, putting a casino in downtown Atlanta. There's also some emerging evidence on what the legalization of sports betting has done to mental health in the United States. Again, this is spurred by the repeal of PASPA and individual states legalizing sports betting. So I had an older paper of mine that shows that increased access to recreational gambling in Canada had no negative impact on or a reduced probability of having certain chronic health conditions and a positive impact on life satisfaction. So we think that, why would legalizing sports betting reduce the incidence rate of chronic health problems? Well, probably because it helps people to better understand risk and better handle losses, which, creates less stress and these are things like heart disease. There's another recent paper that shows that legalization of sports betting in the U.S. led to an increase in reported bad mental health days, primarily among young men. Again, the very group that most heavily bets on sports. They're probably unhappy about the outcomes, the unexpected outcomes that they have a bet on. And then there is a paper that shows that legalization of sports betting in the U.S. led to increased reports of intimate partner violence. Again, negative outcomes on bets generate powerful emotional cues, which lead people to act out in certain ways or to have worse mental health. And then finally, I was asked to talk a little bit about the horse racing industry in West Virginia. And so we have 4 tracks, and the state legislature created this West Virginia Thoroughbred Development Fund, which distributes about $5 million to horse breeders, horse owners, and the owners of sires of accredited West Virginia bred horses. That money comes from other tax revenues generated by other forms of gambling, so that's a subsidy. There's also other programs that use gambling tax revenues from other types of gambling to subsidize purses in races only for West Virginia bred horses. So that's about $10 million per year in those subsidies for the purses. And so I guess the takeaway there is, in places outside Kentucky, which has a long-standing and large horse breeding industry, in order to keep this viable in West Virginia, we issue a lot of subsidies to that industry, which you might want to think about if you are considering legalization of horse racing. And that's what I've got, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Humphreys. I'll start with one of your early slides of the fiscal year, West Virginia. Just looking at a couple lines here. Quick math. If I'm adding lottery products, retail scratch-offs, and digital scratch-offs, comes up to about 219 versus the 5,276 for retail and mobile sports betting. Would that also suggest that obviously offering a lottery is affecting far more people than online sports betting does?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yes. It's right. So, and I think it's because primarily lottery is a very popular product with all sorts of segments of society. But really, it's young men who are interested in sports betting and who actually sign up for those mobile accounts and undertake sports betting.
Thank you. Any other questions online? Online questions?
Yes, sir.
Chairman Powell.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Chairman Powell.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Professor Humphreys, thank you. You've given a lot of detailed information there, but one of the things that sticks into my mind is that in Georgia, we don't have any of the other forms of gambling. We do have illegal sports betting. There is no casinos in Georgia. I was actively involved, as was Representative Williams a few years ago. It's been about 6 or 7 years ago, and we did an in-depth hearing around the states at that time. And we were looking at, since Georgia is one of the states that it takes a constitutional amendment, the people have to ratify. As a good Senator Hickman had said just a minute ago, there was a poll that was ran on the ballot last year about, and overwhelmingly people in Georgia said they want the right to vote, quite frankly. And it's our duty as legislators, if that's what the wishes are, to put it out there. But we were looking at the bigger scheme of things. And when I say the bigger scheme is that most of us have no problem with sports betting, even though we understand that that is one of the lesser dollar amounts of revenue that would come in. That's really to appease those folks. And in this new day that we're living in of app-based everything in the world, except going to the men's room, that's what they're doing with sports betting. We also know that in the case of horse racing, which a lot of us would like to see horse racing for nothing else other than the sport itself as a great American sport, but also to enhance our agricultural community, which would be the biggest beneficiary of that, and then what little amount comes in off of the revenue from that. But one of the things that we looked at was the casinos. You know, too many people have a connotation when they look at Las Vegas. They think that's the way all casinos are. They think that everything's going to be packed into one area, and that's, you know, Las Vegas is sort of a different structure that you'll never see anywhere else in this world. But we had looked at that time about the economic impacts as a recreational. And gambling today with destination, we coined that term destination resorts, because Georgia is a destination to go, and anybody doesn't believe that, all you have to do is look at the population growth since the pandemic. Georgia was one of the best hid secrets in the world. When the pandemic came, we've got everybody from all over God's creation has moved here. And one of the things that we'd looked at was the destination resorts. And, you know, I'm of the opinion that the casino companies, the corporations that build casinos and open them up today, gambling isn't their primary business today. Their primary business is recreation. It's giving people a place to go, a nice resort where they handle a number of different things. I mean, some of the casinos may have horse racing, or they may have golf courses, or they may have yacht clubs, or they may have convention centers, and it just goes on and on and on. And all these are major revenue generators. So what I'm looking at and what you're talking about here is that when you talk about cannibalization, I don't think we've got a problem with cannibalization. What we've got to do is, if it gets on the ballot and the people of Georgia decide that's what they want, that it looks to me like Georgia would be an excellent place to pick up revenue to make up. We know that we're going to lose under the federal budget bill, that we're going to have a major cut on a lot of our areas, healthcare being one of them, which is some of the things that I've been touting for years. So I guess I don't even know if I'm just doing a comment or a question, but I appreciate what you've said, you know, but I think for it to be a success in Georgia, it needs to have the people need to have the choice to implement all forms of it.
I agree. Yeah.
A tight number.
And I think the evidence supports the point you've made here. There's unlikely to be much cannibalization in Georgia because there's only lottery available now. So there's really not a lot of close substitute. I don't think a lot of people are going to stop buying lottery tickets in Georgia because you open casinos. But I think it's also important, and the evidence supports this idea, that casinos are an entertainment industry. And, you know, it's hospitality, right? They have nice restaurants. They have concerts. Casinos these days operate hotels. And it is a resort business, and it can draw significant numbers of people from outside the state, which would be new tax revenues that Georgia wouldn't collect if you decide to legalize that. And you know, you look at where most states put casinos, right on the border, right? The most popular casino in West Virginia is in Charlestown. Has a hotel, restaurants, horse racing track, but it's right next to Northern Virginia, which is a very populous area, and they draw a lot of people from Northern Virginia out of the state to go in there and stay in the hotel, go to the restaurant, gamble, watch the horses, all those sort of things. And I think that's an important distinction between casinos and other forms of gambling. And you're right to think about that, because it's more than, you know, it's a tourism sort of development project and not just a gambling-based development, economic development project.
So whatever comes in with the resort-based casinos, destination-based casinos, then really what we're looking at is several different forms of economic benefits. One is the gambling tax itself. But whatever that may be, you can almost triple that amount on sales and use taxes that come into the state. The revenue that can be supplanted other forms of revenue coming into the state for whatever the purpose may be. But then there's also one other benefit to it, and that's the employment benefit. You know, I know down there in Savannah where y'all are, or where our committee is meeting today, About a month ago, there was an announcement of an old industry down there that's shutting their doors. And I understand there's several thousands of people that may be losing their jobs. But you know, these type of activities are noted that they pay very well. So you know, at the end of the day, I think that people talk about the stress of gambling and such like that, which I don't see that now as it probably might have been at once upon a time. But I don't think any of this could be near as stressful as people who have lost their sources of income or have no future to find sources of incomes or to have adequate health care. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Professor.
I got a quick question.
Hey, Al, it's good to see you.
Good to see you, Brad. Listen, I know you're from West Virginia, so I've had to hear about West Virginia for years now from our current president, of course. And my question is, in West Virginia, and I can't remember this, and you're much smaller than Georgia, but what are the revenues in West Virginia now, and what is the average tax on your state? And I did want to do an aside. There's a tendency now to move to suburbia instead of downtown casinos. The Wynn Resort outside of Boston is probably one of the highest grossing ones in America now, if not the highest. And the average pay is $30 per hour. And starting pay is $30 an hour. That's for housekeepers, and then you go up from there. Tell me about the revenue in West Virginia. I'm trying to make a comparison of possibility in Georgia, and what your percentage of tax is there.
Yeah, unfortunately, Al, I don't have that number right on the tip of my tongue. But I'll tell you this: I don't know if these results from West Virginia would generalize to Georgia, because West Virginia is the anti-Georgia, right? We're a small state with a shrinking population.
Yeah.
I mean, we lost a seat in the House in the last census because of population loss, and you know, we are a poor state and a state with a lot of chronic health problems. So I don't know if how well many of the results from West Virginia would generalize to a prosperous, growing state and big state like Georgia.
Point well taken. Point well taken. Okay.
So I have a hard deadline here. I've got to teach a class in 20 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Humphreys. I appreciate you joining us today and appreciate your testimony.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this opportunity, and good luck to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Brad.
All right, Miss Jeannie Seaver.
Just because this clicker does not seem to be working, so just you can go back and forth like that.
Like this? Okay, got it. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeannie Seaver, and I am the founder of Moms Against Gambling. And I am here to present and to talk about what our organization is all about and who we represent, and to relay, which is not often heard, especially in a room like this or other committees, about the harms of gambling. The first and foremost is our children. Our children are being targeted on their iPhones and video games encouraged to go and play the slot machines and I'll show you in the slide later, to get free stuff. That's what's happening now at our children. The gambling industry is targeting our children. I think that we first need to really say the word that this is all about, and it's gambling. It's not gaming, it's gambling. The professor previously at least had said the word gambling, but this is all about gambling. I don't know about you, but I know that I was raised in a family where there was addiction. And I'm sure everyone in this room has probably had the same thing, or at least knows someone that had to deal with addiction and the heartache and the destruction of life that it brings. Gambling is harmful and not a revenue windfall, but sports betting is the most dangerous to kids, most addictive, and the lowest return to our state. I'm here to speak on behalf of mothers, fathers, grandmothers, grandfathers, addicted folks all over this country. There's millions that are addicted in this country that nobody wants to talk about. And then there's the families that have to deal with the impact and the negative and the heartache and the total destruction of the family. Gambling expansion would forever change Georgia. You can't take it back. We all know how that goes. Let's see. For example, gambling industry is targeting our children. You can look what you see. I'm not just making this up. This is on the internet. This is what kids are seeing. Pushing for casinos, pushing for Spider-Mans. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. I ran for lieutenant governor, and I was down in Lyons, Georgia, and I was speaking to a GOP, and there was this 10-year-old boy there that had never been to a GOP meeting before, and he came with his grandparents for the first time. And I spoke about the gambling issue, and at the end, he raised his hand and he said to me, "Miss Seaver," and he stood up, 10 years old. I know exactly what you are talking about when you're talking about gambling. I constantly get gambling apps popping up on my iPhones and video games. So I was like, okay, Lord, keep on talking about it, because nobody wants to talk about the harms. I've got a lot of different slides, and I know that there is one that I'm gonna go through this quickly. I might need an additional 5 or 10 minutes, but I have a video too I want to see. But this problem, gaming by age, if you read it, just look at it, read it. I know that you're all gonna have presentations. Look at these kids. I mean, I know there's been a lot of laughter in this room, and I've heard it before on the videos or other committee members. This is not funny. You're talking about an addiction that will destroy people's lives forever. 1 out of 5 people that become addicted to gambling attempt suicide. That's pretty serious, and I please pray and hope that you'll think about those kind of things when you hear some of the other information coming up. I won't go to all the details. You can see it up on the screen. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so yes, we've had a lot of people coming from outside our state. But what about people inside our state? People that are being affected, people that a state that we live in and love. I've lived here for 25 years. I love this state. I don't want to see it destroyed. So here is a mom. I was speaking around the state when I was running again for lieutenant governor, and she came up to me and told me she had an addiction problem with dealing with her son, and how can you help me? And I led her to some folks that were able to help her. So I'm going to go ahead and click. I'm going to let you hear. This is about, I think it's a 2-minute. This was given to the higher ed. The Georgia Senate Higher Ed Committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Caroline Yort, and I would like to tell you about the impact that sports betting has had on my immediate family. My 29-year-old son is recently in recovery from a gambling addiction that threatened to take his life. I don't think in the time I have here that I can even scratch the surface of the worry, devastation, and stress that is experienced when you have a loved one addicted to gambling. One of the problems with an online gambling addiction is that on the outside, no one has any idea that there's anything wrong. There are no physical signs of addiction. You don't nod off, or pass out. There are no track marks on your arm. You can't do a blood test for online sports betting, but it is just as deadly, if not more so than any other addiction, because it is so easily hidden from public view. Hopefully the following would give you a glimpse into what happens when someone starts online betting. Our son started sports betting about 5 years ago while living in North Carolina and then Colorado. Living far away from home allowed him to keep his gambling habits from us for several years, but he became deeper and deeper in debt, even though he had employment that paid a good salary and was well-liked and doing well at his job. He ended up so far in debt that he declared bankruptcy to try to get his finances under control and keep a roof over his head. But the problem he needed to address was not the lack of money. It was a gambling addiction. So all his efforts were to no avail. As one of his counselors later said about bankruptcy, "Wow, thanks for the free money, U.S. government. Now my debts are paid off and I can keep gambling." About a year ago, my son was completely consumed by online sports betting, predatory loans to pay off gambling debts, depression, lying, deception, manipulation, and everything that goes along with any addiction. He had ruined many personal relationships and had nowhere to turn but to his parents. We naively thought that if we could just cut off his access to money and take away his phone and or computer, the gambling would stop. The problem was that the access or lack thereof to funds and devices was not the issue. There was always a predatory agency that would give him a short-term loan at an exorbitant interest rate. He could always find another phone. His brain had been physically changed to demand the higher levels of dopamine that gambling gave him, identical to the effects of heroin. His brain would not and could not turn off the search for that high without an intervention. He said to us multiple times, "I just want it to stop, and I just want it to end." Try hearing that as alone. We were desperate to help him. You have to understand that my son is an exceptional human being. He's brilliant. He skipped the first grade. He was first in his class every single year, extremely athletic. He was a nationally ranked swimmer and played on the U.S. Youth Soccer National Team. He played soccer in college at a Division I scholarship, and graduated magna cum laude. He's an empathetic, kind, and compassionate human being. We knew all of that was still in there somewhere, even though he was withdrawn, isolated, and completely removed from the child we thought we had raised. After contacting multiple treatment centers in Georgia trying to get him help and hearing repeatedly, "Is it just gambling?" we didn't know where to turn. He and we were at the end of our respective ropes. We were terrified he would lose hope and would end up taking his life. His nieces would no longer get the snuggles of their Uncle Bubba. He was down a massive hole that he had no idea how to climb out of. In 2022, I had a chance meeting with Jeannie Seaver of Moms Against Gambling. I knew she was involved with trying to keep online sports betting from becoming legal in Georgia. So this past summer, I found her on Facebook and messaged her. She responded and connected me with a gambling addict specialist. He helped us gain access to one of only 3, and I say 3, treatment centers in the entire country that specialize in gambling addiction. And it was covered by our son's work health insurance, thank God. 5 days after our initial contact with the treatment center in Virginia, our son was able to begin proper counseling and the intervention that was crucial to his recovery. He was able to retrain his brain to accept normal levels of dopamine. Treatment centers that don't specialize in gambling do not know how to handle things that are only a problem in online gambling addiction, like access to your phone and computer. Everyone has a phone these days. It's a necessary part of life. It is also the primary way a gambling addict feeds his addiction. Imagine a heroin addict having a ready-to-go syringe in his hand at all times, or a binge eater having a tray full of their favorite food in their lap, and then tell them, just ignore it. Let's see how far that gets you. Our son is doing well now, thank God, but I am not sure that the worry and stress will ever really be over for me. It will be a lifelong process for him and a lifelong worry for his family. So I implore you to not pass this legislation out of committee. Please do not send it any further. The proceeds from legalizing online sports betting in the state of Georgia are gained on the backs of people like me and the lives and deaths of people like my son. This really is a matter of life and death. It is not, as Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones has said, money that just falls in our lap. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I think I'm going to need your help to get me back. Just close it, probably? Oh, there we are. Okay. So that's one mother. I'm sure there's many thousands of others. And we think about our athletes now. Athletes that are losing their lives, time, careers by betting when they're not supposed to be. So I'm speaking for them and the ones that have become addicts. Gambling addiction in Georgia, right, currently we have about 380,000 addicted gamblers. 200,000 of them have severe addiction issues, and that's with the Georgia Lottery, which offers the slot machines. Let me tell you about a little story about the slot machines. As we all know, they're all in our convenience stores, and I would go to different convenience stores and I would say, hey, tell me about what it's like when you see customers come in, when they come in and what happens as far as all the slot machines there. He told me about the story about a mother that came in with her 3 children. She walks in, probably was going for milk, but then she saw the slot machines. She sat down, played the slots. After that, she went and bought some lottery tickets, and her children asked her, Mommy, can we get a snack? Can we get a snack? No, I don't have the money. It preys on the poor. We're going to search and go after money which preys on the poor and the vulnerable and the lower income. And like you had heard, there are no treatment facilities in Georgia, and there are only 3 specifically gambling addiction facilities in the nation. In the nation. Imagine what stats will become if any additional expansion of commercialized gambling is legalized in Georgia. So this is a long video. It's 15 minutes. How much time am I at right now?
About 15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay. I want to go ahead and at least would be very educational. It talks about the histories and the harms of gambling. And I'll probably give it 6-8 minutes, or maybe you'll give me a few extra 10 minutes if you want to hear it. It is lengthy, and I know, that it's really, really important. And the only way to get this, for you to hear it, and to hear about the harms is to be able to give this to you in the front, because like you said, we want to make sure we educate our members on the harms. So I'll go ahead and push it. I'll get down for this one. It doesn't seem to be connecting.
of the American Family Union. And yet today, almost all lawmakers are lockstep in their support of it. The roots of online sports gambling boom in the United States trace back to a 2018 Supreme Court decision after a petition was filed by the state of New Jersey challenging something known as the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, or PASPA. PASPA passed in 1992, effectively restricted all legal sports gambling action to the state of Nevada. And now this is stuck in New Jersey's craw in 2009, especially after the Great Recession. They needed a way to bail out Atlantic City casinos. So on their behalf, they brought the suit against the law, where it would be eventually resolved in their favor in 2018. Now, in the 9 years where New Jersey brought the suit against PASPA, something important also happened: the absolute explosion of something called daily fantasy sports. Daily fantasy sports was effectively a loophole allowing people to place wagers on fantasy sports leagues and daily payouts, something that many Americans were already doing in their spare time. It aligned perfectly with the rise of the smartphone. Companies like DraftKings and FanDuel began their entry into the market under this guise. So it was at this time where the roots of the epidemic were laid. Wagers were already being placed in mass by millions of Americans, and the normalization of gambling on the phone was planted. Perhaps most importantly, though, these companies began to hone their strategies, which include insane levels of marketing focused on one specific message: it's a game of skill, and you can hit it big. Now, in a sense, they are correct, but there's a lot more subtext removed, which I will return to later. Suffice to say this: they were already tanned, rested, and ready for the Supreme Court decision, which opened the floodgates. On May 14, 2018, the Supreme Court struck down PASPA. Within a month, the state of Delaware began accepting single-game wagers, which would be seen as tame today. By the end of the month, 7 states had legalized sports gambling, and by today, as I speak, 39 states, including the District of Columbia, have now had it legalized. Now, it's important to note, when I say legalized, it doesn't mean that it's a free-for-all. What it really means is that a few mega companies like DraftKings, FanDuel, PrizePicks, and others have effectively rolled up the legal sports betting market by getting separate states to grant them preferential licenses to run action in their state. This is important because the quasi-monopolistic way that sports gambling runs on a state-by-state basis means that it is not a fair marketplace. And 2, it means that their excesses and sins are multiplied to absolutely stupendous profit, and fundamentally are altering the way that American sports leagues will operate for decades to come. So let's take some time to ruminate on gambling itself and the attitudes of the United States towards it over the years. It's fair to say the U.S. has undergone an extraordinary transition from effectively a nation of prudish Christians to much more secular libertarians in the span of just a few decades. This is evident in current social attitudes, from everything on abortion, gay marriage, to marijuana, and now sports gambling. Gambling itself was traditionally viewed as a sinful, backwards activity that was actively discouraged by the state for centuries. Now, the compromise that we got to was one that I actually think is quite sensible. People will always gamble. Let's not make it too easy. You can do it, but you have to go to a physical casino. There are governing bodies like the Nevada Gaming Commission, which make sure these games are run fairly. And in general, that attitude was to confine it to as small places as possible that are accessible, who are committed, but who did not want to make it part of everyday life. Quite sensible, in my opinion. Should be applied to all vices. We understand they exist, but it shouldn't be too easy to indulge, from cigarettes to alcohol. And this has been an attitude in America now for decades. But then everything changed. And now all of a sudden, sports gambling is not just legal, but it's available everywhere. At the click of a button on your smartphone that's always in your pocket, to hundreds of millions of Americans. And the results are in. They're astonishing. Since 2018, U.S. customers have placed approximately $500 billion in bets at legal sports books and climbing, turning a nation that had rare access to sports gambling into the largest gambling marketplace on earth. This has transformed the finances of everyday Americans in a way that has not happened in generations. My friend Charles Lehman summed up 3 separate large-scale studies. The top-line findings are this: for every $1 waged on sports betting, household savings is depleted by $2. Legalized online gambling has increased the risk of household bankruptcy in a state by 25 to 30%. And worst of all, legalized sports gambling has massively increased the rates of domestic violence, specifically against spouses of those who lose. Unsurprisingly, all of these effects are felt by the most economically precarious households, and the financial effects are concentrated amongst young men. Fair to say it's been a disaster. So let's go through the arguments for why, even though all of this is really bad, we should overlook it. First is a philosophical argument. This is what living in a free society looks like. That just because some people can't control themselves, we shouldn't ruin the fun for everyone. I understand that argument. I agree with it partially. But I would say this, the U.S. has recognized always that we can respect freedom of choice while also recognizing that when something is bad and trying to reduce that behavior for the societal benefit of all citizens, we should. We have arrived at this with a sensible attitude, for example, towards cigarettes. We know cigarettes are bad, so we tax them. We restrict their place of sale. We don't allow cigarette companies to advertise on television. We have developed good social norms around not wanting people to smoke. Nonetheless, something like 20% of Americans still smoke, but it's down from a record of like 40 or 50% decades ago, and new uptake in smoking continues to reduce. Now, compare cigarettes to online gambling. DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, PrizePicks are allowed to flood the airwaves with a single message. All you have to do is use your skill and your genius, and you can become a winner. I will explain soon how this is a complete lie. But second is this, and what I want people to understand. It is impossible for these companies to run a fair operation that does not rely on exploiting gambling addicts and to still make a profit. A new study by the Southern Methodist University tracked 700,000 online sports bettors for 5 years. They found less than 5% of users ever withdrew any profit. The remainder of the users either broke even or lost money, covering the winnings of those 5. But worst is this. 3% of all bettors who lost the most accounted for 50% total revenue of these online sports betting companies. In other words, less than 5% of people actually realized any profit. The rest were losers, and the big losers lost so much they made up 50% of total revenue. Now couple this with the dirty secret of online sports betting. If you are one of the less than 5% who win, you're lucky if you're allowed to gamble for even a few months on these apps. Once you start to win consistently, these gambling companies are fully within their rights to limit your bet size to amounts to less than 10 or even $1, meaning that if you're any good, they are allowed to restrict your action and their potential exposure. So this is an outrageously good business, isn't it? You can promise people they can get rich. If they actually do, you cut them off. Then you employ all company resources towards extracting as much as humanly possible from gambling addicts to make up 50% of your revenue. In other words, if these gambling companies were forced to allow fair play and then follow their own guidelines around restricting addicts, something they are legally required to do, they would go bankrupt, and this entire farce would fall apart. Take the story of a New Jersey man, known to us as Mdalo 1990. In 2020, this man never placed a bet in his life. By 2024, he had lost approximately $1 million despite making an income of $175,000 per year. He drained his wife's investments, he maxed out their credit cards, he drained his young children's savings accounts and sold the gifts that they were given for Christmas and their baptisms. Now, it's really easy to say, yeah, it's his fault, screw him. But according to his wife's lawsuit, this user was contacted on a daily basis by DraftKings VIP hosts. They facilitated his access to gambling products despite knowing it was impossible for him to be able to support the amount of money that he was placing on wagers with his W-2 income. Their own policies, as dictated by the state, require them to have gamblers placing large sums prove their ability to furnish funds by providing them a W-2 statement or bank statements. According to his wife, quote, they knew he would not be able to continue to gamble large sums of money if they required verification. And they also knew the source of the money was, quote, illegitimate. A modest amount of due diligence required by their own policies would have shown he did not have the ability to wager. Literally 4 times his literal W-2 salary. Throughout this entire time, again, on a daily basis, DraftKings threw so-called free promotions at him, whiskey glasses, VIP tickets, and more. Now, they do not do this out of the goodness of their heart. As I said earlier, people like this man constitute only 3% of gamblers, but make up 50% of revenue. In fact, some people have caught on. A new number of pro sports bettors are mimicking the behavior of people like Mdalo 1990. They log into their accounts in the middle of the night to make it seem like they cannot sleep without checking their bets. Why? Because it flags to the algorithm that they are gambling addicts. It means that the company is more likely to shower you with so-called free promotional money and to continue your addiction chain. This is fundamentally different than alcohol or cigarette companies. Cigarette companies are not allowed to advertise, period, let alone literally sponsor major sporting events. For Furthermore, cigarette companies are not allowed to identify their so-called super smokers and shower them in free and addictive cigarettes to encourage their addiction. Same with alcohol companies or any other vice. In this case, the statistics show us that the profit margins and the very business model of these companies rely on so-called problem gamblers to prop up the revenue of the entire company. And now let me take it even a step further, because now imagine if cigarette companies had a super addictive special cigarette, and that cigarette was the one that they are marketing the most, pushing and making the most money on. That is the case of online sportsbooks, who are pushing a particular type of bet called a parlay bet. Most of you probably know what it is, but it's simple. A parlay bet is a contingent bet, where several discrete events have to happen for you to win. Parlay bets, unsurprisingly, have the biggest payouts, and unsurprisingly, they have the biggest loss rate for gamblers. Why? Because they're unlikely. And yet, this exact bet, the parlay bet, is the one most pushed, most marketed, and most used by online sports bettors. The largest online sportsbook in the United States, FanDuel, has amassed 46% market share in the United States, specifically by marketing massively profitable single-game parlay bets, which are gigantically profitable for the company. We don't have exact data. We do know this from the state of Illinois. 60% of all wagers in the state wagered online are parlay bets. We also know that the online sportsbook know that they will win with such regularity, they build it into their profit forecast before the customers even officially lose, and they remain the single most profitable bet to the company. So again, bringing it back to a cigarette comparison, you target the most addicted, and you sell them the worst thing for them. The system is built on a simple premise: ban winners, milk losers for all they're worth. All of you who are placing small wagers for fun is great, but the thing is, it's only enabled by crippling addicts. Already, Gamblers Anonymous is reporting massive spikes in the number of young bettors calling their hotline, coming to their meetings. Some children as young as 14 have found their ways to bet their parents' phones are full addicts. This will only continue, which brings me back to the comparison I made at the top. It took nearly a decade to reckon with Purdue Pharma and the OxyContin crisis. It created an entire generation of previously not known heroin addicts. But the signs a few years were all there. And now we've unleashed an addiction with one of the highest rates of people taking their own lives and made it easily accessible to hundreds of millions of Americans. If anything, this trend is accelerating. Literally just a few days ago, the state of Missouri legalized sports gambling, now the 40th state to do so. And so, when people come back to this in a decade, and we have millions of gambling addicts, high rates of domestic violence, alcoholism, and we need to figure out what to do, let me offer this modest proposal. The solution is staring us all in the face. More of what we used to do. PASPA was correct about one thing. It is not fair that Nevada is the only monopoly on sports gambling. So instead, adopt a model what the UK used to have. Sports betting is legal and available in person at parlors, which are widely accessible. People can access it, but it requires physically having to go to a location with cash. This introduces the same level of friction that all other vices are governed by in the U.S. Second, betting organizations must be subject to fairness rules. If they advertise anyone can win, then everyone must be allowed to win. They cannot be allowed to limit sharp sports bettors and must have a truly free marketplace. 3, we must have heavy oversight on the ongoing fusion between professional sports and gambling companies. You can call this nanny state intervention if you want, but here's the truth. The NFL, the National Football League itself, it only exists because of multiple acts of Congress and preferential treatment from the U.S. government. Sports and the NFL are important to the American character. Gambling corruption scandals are already beginning to question the very integrity of the game itself. Leagues have become physically intertwined with multi-billion-dollar gambling behemoths is a recipe for corruption and disaster. So I will end with a warning that I gave many years ago. Sometimes private industry can be just as much of a threat to your freedom as liberty, to your freedom and liberty as the government itself. And in this case, I think it is quite clear the damage gambling companies have wrought and will continue to do to America's families poses a direct threat to our country. I am clear-eyed. It will only get worse. But I hope I could help all of you at least think about what I believe is going to be a major problem of our time. So what do you think, Crystal? Did I convince you?
Hey guys, obviously I had a lot of thoughts on what Sagar had to say there. So if you want to see my thoughts on this monologue and every other Sagar monologue.
Okay, I know it was a lot of information. It went real, he was a quick speaker, but I hope you've learned something about it. And like I said, the link is there if you ever want to go back and look at it. Facts on gambling, you know, it changes Georgia forever. 24/7 gambling on your iPhones. It's just like having a casino. I'm not going to go through all of it, but you've got the information so you can go through later. Gambling preys on the poor and on minority communities. Gambling creates mental health problems and gambling addictions, their children and their families. Gambling increases citizens' dependence on welfare and Medicare. We're the #1 state to do business in. We don't need gambling messing things up. We have over $11 billion in surplus, and I don't know, I'm close. It was from 11 to 16. Hope and pre-K and kindergarten are fully funded. Georgia doesn't need any additional revenues. These are some recent studies which basically show the negative impacts and harms from gambling. I gave you a handout on the Georgia State College. I wholeheartedly ask that you review it. There's been other studies done on the negative impacts right here in our own state. Mercer University, I'd recommend reaching out to them for data. Have y'all ever reached out to Cherry or Mercer?
Yes.
Okay. I know you've got one study from UGA about, it's a recent study that was done, but there's still more data that's available. Emory, and you know, we're all about the Constitution and freedoms, and we don't want to take freedoms away. I'm a big advocate for the Constitution, but there are government's roles when it comes to freedom and harm. And this study is definitely something that you really want to look into and read. It's some case study that was done right here in Georgia at Emory. I can't remember the professor's name, but you can click on that link, then it'll take you right to the Lancet report handout. It's Public Health Commission on Gambling. This is becoming a huge public health issue, mental health issue, and it's a lengthy report, but it's worth the read if you would please take the time. One other thing, the New York Times article, I don't know if you've ever heard about the cigars, the booze, and the money regarding the sports betting lobbying blitz. I gave you a copy of that also. If you would please take the time to read it. It'll educate you on a lot of things that's happened in the past. This is not a long clip, I promise, but this is Dr. Harry Levette. He gave a testimony to Congress. He's not against sports betting, but it's just interesting. I think it's 5 minutes. 5 minutes, and then I'll close up, guys, I promise.
Dr. Levette. Good morning. You will hear often this morning the words responsible gaming. This is code for gambling industry self-regulation and state control. I am here this morning to offer Congress a different approach to regulating the industry from a prevention of harm perspective as an issue of public health. I'm grateful to Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Graham, and the distinguished members of this committee for the opportunity to offer testimony regarding the public health crisis created by the unprecedented expansion of online sports gambling. It is my hope this is the start of public dialogue and debate, which will result in Congress enacting much needed legislation to bring comprehensive public health reform and regulation to the sports gambling industry. I serve dual roles as Director of Gambling Policy with the Public Health Advocacy Institute at Northeastern University School of Law and as an internationally certified gambling addiction counselor. This permits me to clinically treat patients and families suffering with gambling addiction while simultaneously serving as a researcher and policy advocate working for public health reform. I am also a gambling addict in recovery. I made my last bet on April 27, 2014, and on that same night nearly took my own life. With gambling addiction, the risk of suicide is omnipresent. Research shows that 1 in every 2 people suffering will contemplate suicide, and 1 in 5 will attempt. In the grips of my addiction, I devastatingly hurt many people who had loved and trusted me. This included clients, friends, my kids, and the people closest to me. Personal carnage related to gambling addiction destroys the most trusted and intimate relationships, often beyond repair. Gambling addiction took my mind, my soul, body, and conscience. It left me broken, battered, and homeless. I was unrecognizable to myself. The only thing I had remaining was my name. On February 15th, 2015, I stood in a courtroom in Philadelphia, a court where I had practiced law for more than 2 decades and where my father had practiced for more than half a century. In the presence of the court, the clients I had betrayed, my children, and more, I pled guilty to financial crimes committed in the throes of my gambling addiction. On that day, I pledged under oath to the court that if I could get well and find recovery, I would give back by doing everything in my power to prevent others from suffering. I come before this distinguished body filled with a deep sense of gratitude, respect, and purpose. The mission has never been more important. We are presently witnessing the early years of a fast-building public health crisis, and the time is now for Congress to act. We have known for more than 12 years that gambling is an addictive product, and gambling disorder and addiction similar to heroin, opioids, tobacco, alcohol, and cocaine. With every other addictive product, government regulates the advertising, promotion, distribution, and consumption. Sadly, with gambling, the exact opposite is occurring. The gambling industry business model is designed to deliver constant and nonstop action on every phone, tablet, and computer. With the use of technology and AI, the industry and its sports and media partners have turned every micro moment in each game or event into more and more gambling action. From the speed of the next pitch, football snap, basketball shot, as the chairman mentioned, even ping pong from Eastern Europe. The gambling industry and its sports partners have taken sports away from the children, families, and American people. Sports have become the equivalent of a nonstop slot machine. Understand, I am not opposed to sports gambling. In fact, I support its properly regulated legalization. However, I am vehemently opposed to what has happened in just 6 years. What has been launched on the American people is a newly created AI-generated online gambling business model, which delivers a fundamentally different, defectively designed, and inherently dangerous product to every phone, tablet, computer, and TV. The gambling industry has expanded to include once unthinkable partnerships, which include sports leagues, teams, owners, players, the world's largest media and tech companies, social media, AI, and state governments themselves. All are acting in concert to deliver online gambling at light speed and ensure the action never stops. The new AI-fueled business model will inexorably result in increased gambling addiction and gambling-related harm. I see this every day in my practice as a clinician. So how did we get here, and why is it essential that Congress act now? There are 2 quick answers to this question. First, online sports gambling is a fundamentally different and more dangerous product than ever could have been imagined. In fact, DraftKings recently purchased an AI company called Simplebet, so that DraftKings now owns the technology to deliver targeted AI-generated gambling to each individual user. The second, follow the money. Sports leagues, teams, owners, and players now sell their data to the gambling industry. Every single sport. The industry then turns this data into instant micro-betting opportunities where the action never stops. The industry, having spent billions with a B to acquire this data, has only one way to recoup their money and turn a profit. They're selling no widgets in the marketplace. They are converting this data into more and faster instant gambling action. And that is a matter of public health. I don't come here only to warn. I come armed with public health policy solutions, and I hope we will address many of these during the Q&A. I'm presently privileged to work with Senator Blumenthal and Congressman Tonko. I look forward to working with many more of you, and I invite your questions.
Thanks, Dr. Levan.
Another heavy-duty education. Hope you learned something on that, or if you've never heard it before. I'll go ahead. You can click on the link, and instead of going through the Fox News segment, which basically it's on the 5. I'm sure you're familiar with the 5. They go through it, and each one of them say it's the next opioid, it's destroying sports, it's destroying athletes, and I please ask that you to go ahead and take the time to listen to that. Just visuals, gambling articles state in the harms. You'll get a copy of the PowerPoint and you'll probably post that on your website. David Ramsey, destroying families. Gambling has the highest suicide rate of any addiction. You know, we hear from a lot of the legislators, well, since it's already happening, we need to regulate it and make it legal. And I say, should we also legalize, you know, and regulate human trafficking or, you know, drugs or, you know, illegal drugs? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's just a talking point. How it harms men. And I'm just going to glance through, but this one you're not going to like. But horse racing is a dying industry. Racetracks bring in slot machines to stay in business. They call them racinos. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before. Have any of you ever heard that term? But anyway, I would definitely do some more research on that because it's still gambling. Gambling is a trickle-down effect. You know, we've had sports, we have lottery, and then we have slot machines, and now you want to legalize casinos on our phones and horse racing and sports betting and fantasy sports. But anyway, not happy about that. But as far as gambling is not impacted, illegal sports, despite the widespread legalization of sports betting, the offshore black market continues to attract billions of dollars of wagers. Legalized sports betting has not reduced the impact of illegal sports betting operators. Any Georgian that believes the high risk of addiction, financial ruin, broken families, and exploitation of the poor should be ignored. No. So, again, I'm just going to real quick. Casinos and online gambling would increase addictions, bankruptcies, and crime, sex trafficking, and suicide. A lot of states that have legalized gambling are reporting over an 28% increase in bankruptcies. Every dollar that we collect in revenues from gambling, it'll cost taxpayers $5 to $7 on the financial negative impacts of the families and the addicts. 1 out of 5 become addicted. Slot machines are the worst to become addicted to, and a lot of it with the racinos, that's all COAM machines pretty much. Gambling industry is targeting our children on their phones, and legalized gambling increases irresponsible betting behavior, especially among low-income populations. So you talk about let the people decide. Government's first task, and we put you in office to protect us all. We trusted you that. We all know that if passed, if the referendum goes to the people, the billion-dollar gambling industry will be advertising to make gambling sound like the best thing since sliced bread, where the opposition, the people won't really get to, as you can see in the past, meeting today and the last two, there's not a lot of us coming out or speaking, but we are trying to, and I'm hearing that we will have a 4th meeting so other people will be able to go ahead and have public meetings to speak. The Talking Points works now. The Talking Point, it's for the children. That's how it started out before. That Talking Point hasn't worked, and now it's just about legalized gambling. Georgia currently has $11 billion in surplus and have fully funded HOPE and early ed programs. And again, I'd like to say, I am not a paid consultant to be here. I am not a paid lobbyist to be here. I am a Georgian that loves Georgia and everyone in it. And I feel it's a responsibility. God has somehow put this in my lap to go out and spread the message and at least educate Georgians and our elected officials on the horrible, horrible addictions that gambling causes. If funding is needed for additional early ed programs, and I'm not a big person on taxing this or taxing that, but why not, let's tax the lottery and those funds be designated to a special fund designated to education and promote the message, which we all know is not out there wide enough, about the trade opportunities that our younger generation has in this great state. We have some of the best technical colleges in this nation are in the state. Let's focus more on those kind of things instead of gambling away lives in Georgia. One more. In closing, never forget, online gambling has been a game changer because it's introduced so many people to gambling, and it facilitates gambling 24 hours a day. Thank you so much, guys, for the people of Georgia deserve the whole truth, and I really, really appreciate you giving the opportunity to speak. And something to ask you as our leaders, do you want gambling to be your legacy as many other needs as we need other, wait, let me say this again. Do you want gambling to be your legacy when there's so many other great, huge issues in our state that we should be addressing, which we are, and I'm very grateful with the Literacy Council now that's helping getting our kids to read. But do you want to be responsible for the negative impact and harm you've brought to this great state if passed? Gambling expansion would change Georgia forever. Thank you, guys, and I'll take any questions. I know I'm way over my time, and I really appreciate your patience and not coming down on me for doing it.
Well, thank you. I'll start. First, I mean, I sincerely appreciate you being here. We have opened every one of these meetings to anyone that would like to speak on this subject, pro, for, regardless of the industry or the angle. So I appreciate you being here. We had about half of our first meeting were people that were against gambling as well. To clarify a point on an additional meeting, part of some of the confusion is we had some committee meetings that were sandwiched together into one piece of legislation. Originally, when this committee was presented, it was going to be 3 meetings. It got sandwiched with another committee that had 4 assigned to it. So for no gray area, we will have a 4th public meeting where, again, anyone on either side of the issue is welcome. I encourage everybody to reach out promptly to get on that list so that we, as these things have filled up with time. And some people have chosen not to come because they wanted more time, and that is certainly fine. But we will have a 4th meeting just to address that to the committee as well, so their understanding of what has morphed in that and why that has occurred.
One of the things too, Mr. Chairman, is if there's any way we can have a little bit more advance notice than 7 days, 6 days.
I don't want to interrupt you, and I don't want to get into a debate on when we've notified. The first meeting was very short-fused. We needed to get the committee going. That meeting was very short because of that on all fronts, on pro and against. But this meeting had a month-long advance notice. We have reached out in countless ways. I don't want to get no back and forth on that, but we will have advance notice for the next meeting for certain.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, you guys. No other questions?
I do.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So in the 15-minute long video, I'm glad we did watch it to the end because actually a piece of legislation that I presented actually covered all three of his points to make at the end on suggestions for putting guardrails around this. So the fact that that video was played and the fact that that legislation does actually take that advice, I know you're not for that either. So my question is, what is your suggestion on limiting the illegal markets?
I don't think, I'm not the expert, okay? Y'all are the ones that have the resources to reach out. But I don't think that you can stop the international legal stuff that's going on. You can only control what's going on in their state, but that's still not going to stop the illegal gambling from internationally, like is a humongous issue and a national security concern right now, for sure. But I don't see how you can absolutely stop it altogether. He might have mentioned some things, but still, it's still going to be out there. You can Google it, you can do some research on it, and you'll find information on that.
So would you contend then that the people that engage in this, even if I put guardrails on it, even if the Georgians vote for a piece of legislation that would put guardrails on it, that it doesn't matter, that people are going to do it anyway?
No, what I'm saying, I'm talking internationally, because I thought that was the question, was all the illegal gambling going around internationally that you can't stop or control. So it's kind of misleading to say that you in Georgia can control what's happening in other countries for the most part. And I'm sorry, the safeguard, what did you say? What was the last part of your question?
I was asking your suggestions on how to curb it.
To curb it? I think the best thing to do is to make it illegal. And for example, I wouldn't have presenters, lobbyists in your meetings making live bets right there in front of the committee at the state capitol. I think that was totally illegally done, and that should have never happened. And I don't know, it was your committee, I was just surprised. So something could have been done right then and there, but I didn't hear any feedback from it or anything from you. Maybe it happened after, but I mean, those are the kind of things we have to stand up for what people are doing illegally.
It's illegal now.
Yes, it is illegal now to bet in the state of Georgia, and you had one of your presenters, a lobbyist, Georgia Sports Alliance, place a live bet right there in front of your committee. At the last hearing, illegally, right there in front of you, and no one said anything. And if you said something, I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that. I didn't hear anyone in your committee say anything like, well, and maybe I missed it on the video because I was watching afar, but said, hey, you can't be doing that, that's illegal. Right there in your own committee at the state capitol, and no one said anything. That is a problem. Now, you didn't do anything about it then. What makes you think that you're going to regulate it and it's going to change? I'm just saying there are always ways around it. I don't want gambling.
I think we're making the same point.
I do not want addiction and destroy our state. You know casinos coming in our state. You know how the structure is. You look at Las Vegas, it's fading down. Casinos aren't, you don't need to go to them anymore except because you guys want to put them on their phones. So that's like they're sitting in a casino 24 hours a day.
Well, I appreciate you being here.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Should I go ahead and take this? I'll keep this. There's a jump drive in here you can take with you. Brian, you don't want it?
You already emailed it to me, right?
Huh?
You already emailed it to me, right?
I did.
Okay, we're good.
Any other questions? No questions at all, no comment, no feedback other than from Mr. I mean, I don't hear anybody laughing now. What? Yeah. I'm not, you have to, are you allowing him to?
I mean, I don't want to cut you off, but I don't know, we are already 30 minutes behind schedule. Do you want to come to the mic and ask a quick question? Is that the?
Okay. All right. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we are, all right. I apologize, Chris, if I say this wrong. Silky, is that correct?
Yes, sir. You actually you nailed it. One of the few. Well done. Can you guys see me and hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Go right ahead.
And I'm going to drop a link in the chat here to our landing page. I'd sent it to Brian earlier today, but just so everybody has some additional info on here. And I apologize if you have a hard stop at 3:45 to get to another meeting, but we'll try to get through this quick because I think it is really an important issue, not only in conjunction with what you guys are considering in terms of legalizing gaming, but also, this is high stakes for states and for their prerogatives to regulate gaming or choose not to have gaming in their state. And it's really kind of been an issue that has gone under the radar. And so happy to kind of provide an overview of these prediction markets. Just for those who don't know about the American Gaming Association, we are based in Washington, D.C. We represent the regulated gaming industry, and our members include both commercial and tribal casino operators, regulated sports books, equipment manufacturers, and other technology and financial providers who service the industry. The common thread with all our members is that they are heavily licensed and regulated at the state level. And I know that we previously submitted some comments to help inform this committee about the industry's economic impact across the country, and appreciate the opportunity to be invited here to provide some insight on what the rapid expansion of prediction markets might mean to the state of Georgia. Prior to 2025, any Georgian who wanted to place a bet on sports would have had to do so through illegal sports books. It sounds like you guys are well acquainted with that, as I heard the last speaker say that there was actually a demonstration to show how accessible those illegal sports books are, and obviously they remain widely available, highly accessible, and our most recent research indicates that Americans bet around $84 billion annually through online websites and bookies. But what has changed this year in 2025 is that your constituents can now also bet on sports through so-called prediction market platforms. And these are platforms that claim they are offering these wagers legally under the auspices of federal regulatory oversight provided by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, or CFTC. So what are these event contracts that are being used to offer wagers? These are also known as prediction or information contracts, and it's a derivative contract whose payoff is based on a specified event, occurrence, or value, such as a macroeconomic indicator, corporate earnings, level of snowfall, or dollar value of damages caused by a hurricane. And some of those that I just mentioned, you could imagine having some kind of economic value from a hedging utility standpoint. If there was a hurricane coming and you were concerned about potential damage to your property, you could buy an event contract and potentially recoup some of your money. And this has been done certainly under the regulatory oversight of the CFTC and other commodities markets that has helped to stabilize certain agricultural products, futures there. And so what's really happening in our view, and I'll talk about it a little bit more in a second, is that these contracts have been hijacked in a way that was never intended by Congress and is very much contrary to the public interest. And in fact, Congress was concerned about this more than a decade ago and authorized the CFTC to put in place regulatory prohibitions that would really limit the types of event contracts that were going to be able to be traded. And so they put into law prohibitions or the ability for the CFTC to prohibit contracts based on terrorism, assassination, war, gaming, or any activity that is unlawful under any state or federal law. And the CFTC followed the statute there, used their regulatory authority to actually put in to their rules prohibitions across the board that any of those contracts in any of those areas would be per se prohibited. And that's why to date there haven't been any sports related contracts, because they would be under any reasonable reading of the definition of gaming would be considered gaming, and therefore the CFTC would shut them down. That has not been the case this year, and that's important for everyone to know. This is, we're kind of in unprecedented times here with these so-called designated contract markets self-certifying, and this is another thing that I think, for us as we approach this, it was very head-scratching that those who are operating under the CFTC's regulatory authority can essentially just say, we're self-certifying, we're doing these contracts, and then it puts the onus on the CFTC to say no. And if the CFTC doesn't say no, then these contracts are de facto legal, and that's essentially what's happened and what was kicked off in December of last year when an entity, Crypto.com, self-certified contracts on some of the NFL playoff games, some of the college championships, and on the Super Bowl. CFTC didn't do anything about it, and what ensued after that was more prediction platforms self-certifying more sports contracts, and so now we are where we are today, where they're now offering parlays, they're now offering prop bets on individual performances in games, and in some cases for some of these prediction platforms that are supposed to be offering contracts on a variety of different kinds of events that have some kind of economic utility. Sports is pretty much making up 80% or more of the contracts that are traded there. So de facto, national sports betting has happened over the last 9 months and really hasn't gotten the attention that it deserves. I can say that these platforms have kind of spoken out of both sides of their mouth when it comes to what these products are. At times they've said these are financial investment products, and they're offering them through platforms like Robinhood, right next to some of your stocks and other investments. But when they market them, I think it really is revealing, because they refer to it as sports betting that's now legal in all 50 states. And so, we at the AGA are very concerned about this. We have been fighting back, trying to educate folks at the state level about what's happening here, also at the federal level as well, since clearly our belief is that Congress never intended for this to happen, and this is all being done through regulatory capture at the CFTC and them essentially sitting on their hands. But as we continue to fight, I think this is becoming even more of a concern in terms of the public policy dangers that are at play here. Certainly responsible gaming is something that our industry takes very seriously. We're in the midst of September is Responsible Gaming Education Month. Not only do these folks kind of not have any kind of responsible gaming programs by and large, but really I think our concern is that they're blurring the lines between investment and what's meant to be an entertainment product. And we're very clear that sports betting is an entertainment product, something that you're not going to get rich doing. And so therefore you ought to only bet what you can afford to lose. When it's being cast as something that you can invest in and make money off of, I think that runs contrary to the vast majority of our messaging, as well as that of other responsible gaming groups. Another key issue here is that while the minimum age for sports betting in most jurisdictions is 21, you can access these contracts at 18 years of age. And so that's a problem. And then all of the regulatory kind of responsibilities that are placed on operators across every jurisdiction that has sports betting and gaming They're just not present here with regard to what the CFTC is looking for. They're not holding these folks accountable. In fact, we saw just a few months ago markets that for I'm trying to put this delicately, certain sex toys being thrown out during WNBA games, where there were bets being taken through Polymarket, one of the largest of these prediction platforms that's about to re-enter the United States. Lots of online chatter about that, lots of people saying, maybe I'll just go to a WNBA game and throw something on the court, and then I'll be able to cash in on my investment or my prediction, my event contract. So there's certainly a lot of questions about integrity, about creating perverse incentives, and things that are just unconscionable to our industry. So where are we right now? The CFTC, as I said, has been sitting on its hands. The AGA has been trying to work with states, gaming regulators, attorneys general, to really push back on this with Congress to try to hold the CFTC accountable using their oversight jurisdiction. There's a lot of litigation currently going on in this space, at least 3 different federal cases that involve the states of New Jersey, Nevada, and Maryland. And there's also several state-level cases involving Massachusetts and some tribes in California and Wisconsin. So there's a lot of litigation on this front. But we're hoping that there will continue to be support at the state level. There will be visibility for states like Georgia, and I would encourage you guys to get both your Attorney General and others in the government plugged in on this and involved in the litigation. There were 34 attorneys general who penned a amicus brief in one of the federal cases, essentially saying Congress never intended for the CFTC to supplant their regulatory authority over gaming. But I think the bottom line for the purposes of this committee is to understand that while you're very well aware that the illegal market is an option for people across the state and very accessible, we now have a new kind of outlet for people to engage in sports betting with none of the safeguards that come with regulated gaming that we know at the AGA, and certainly no revenue generation for the state, no kind of oversight when it comes to responsible gaming, no participation in statewide self-exclusion programs, which are, obviously a cornerstone of kind of the problem gambling approach in most states that have casino gaming and sports betting. And so it's very concerning, and I do appreciate the opportunity to come here and put this on your radar. I did drop that link in the chat. I also sent Brian kind of a background memo that provides some additional insight in this. But happy to answer any questions. It's a very fast-moving issue. I think that people generally think that because of the various litigation going on, this is something that the Supreme Court may eventually have to deal with, albeit that could take some time to percolate up. But in the interim, these folks have moved very quickly. They've gained popularity through both advertising and marketing, and even some help from the likes of South Park, who just did a episode on them last week, and certainly very popular on Twitter, X, and other social media platforms, where they're really pushing this as an alternative to regulated sports betting. And so something I think that's a concern to us, and hopefully will be a concern to you, and provide some additional thing to think about as you consider whether to legalize gaming in Georgia. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm very happy to answer questions.
Chris, thank you. Any questions for Chris? I know he's got a hard stop, and I appreciate you working with us on our time. Chris, not hearing any questions. I know, thank you so much for being patient with us. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Appreciate it. Please reach out if you need anything.
Will do. Thank you. All right, moving on. Dr. Goody.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you today. I've been asked to provide sort of a factual basis from a professional context. I'm a cognitive psychologist. Since I began graduate training 33 years ago, I've specialized in the cognitive psychology of judgment and decision-making, all manner of how people respond and deal with uncertainty. For the last 20 years or so, that's included studies of gambling and gambling harm. For the last 27 years, I have had the honor to be a member of the psychology faculty at the University of Georgia. For the last year or so, I've also been in an administrative capacity and associate dean of the Franklin College of Arts and Sciences. But I need to be clear, I'm here today in my personal capacity, representing my own views and not those of the University of Georgia. Just to provide context about how the professions of psychology and psychiatry regard gambling harms. In the official manual of mental health conditions, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or DSM 5th edition of the American Psychiatric Association, the chapter is called Substance-Related and Addictive Disorders. That includes a number of, I believe it's 10 different substance use disorders, all of which have 11 symptoms listed, diagnosed on a spectrum of mild, moderate, or severe, depending on how many of the symptoms appear in a particular case. We no longer speak in terms of abuse versus dependence. Rather, there's a more objective approach of speaking in terms of how many objectively definable symptoms a person has. Likewise, new to the 5th edition of DSM is this new concept of behavioral addictions, addictions that don't consist of problems coming from placing a substance in your body. At the moment in DSM-5, there's only one behavioral addiction identified, which is gambling disorder, although DSM-5 also indicates for further study internet gaming disorder. There are 9 symptoms listed of gambling disorder. I'll talk about all 9. Also, it's diagnosed on a spectrum with mild gambling disorder defined as generally being 4 to 5 of the 9 symptoms. Moderate is 6 to 7 of the symptoms. Severe is 8 to 9 of the symptoms. So notice that if a person has 1, 2, or 3 of these symptoms, they don't get diagnosed as having gambling disorder, but that's what often gets referred to as problem gambling or subclinical gambling. So here are the 9 symptoms of gambling disorder, interspersed with symptoms from the substance use disorders that are often regarded as being really similar, so that you can see why it's been identified that gambling disorder belongs in a similar category as substance use disorders. Although it's also acknowledged they are not the same thing, there are differences. So the first symptom is a need to gamble with increasing amounts of money in order to achieve the same, to achieve the desired level of excitement, which has been compared to the tolerance symptom of substance use disorders, which is a need for markedly increased amounts of a substance to achieve intoxication or the desired effect. The second symptom of gambling disorder is restlessness or irritability when attempting to cut down or stop gambling, similar to withdrawal with regard to substance use disorders. So notice that both withdrawal and tolerance, which are in some ways the 2 hallmark characteristics of substance use disorders, also have analogs in gambling disorder. Third, a person has made repeated unsuccessful attempts to control, cut back, or stop gambling, which is similar in substance use disorder to the symptom of persistent desire or unsuccessful efforts to cut down or control the substance use. Fourth, preoccupation with gambling, similar to craving in a substance use disorder. Fifth, gambling when feeling distressed. Sixth, chasing after losing money, often returning another day to get even. And this is a good place to emphasize this is one symptom that does not have any parallel in the substance use disorders. There's nothing comparable to chasing with substance use. Seventh, lies to conceal the extent of involvement with gambling. Eighth, jeopardized or lost a significant relationship, job, or educational or career opportunity because of gambling. This can be related to 3 of the SUD symptoms: failure to fulfill major role obligations at work, school, or home, continued substance use despite having persistent or recurrent social or interpersonal problems, and important social, occupational, or recreational activities are given up or reduced because of alcohol use or substance use. And finally, relying on others to provide money to relieve a desperate financial situation caused by gambling. So those are the 9 symptoms, and again, 4 or 5 merits the diagnosis of mild, 6 or 7, moderate, 8 or 9, severe. The prevalence in the United States and other similar nations it has been estimated around 0.5% of the population, which has been stable over recent decades. Even with shifting definitions in as we modify the DSM, note that the concept of problem gambling, where somebody has less than the threshold number of symptoms, there are more people who fall in that category, so one frequently sees higher rates of problem gambling than of gambling disorder per se. To compare with a couple of other disorders, the lifetime prevalence of alcohol use disorder has been estimated at 8%, and for illicit drug use disorders is 2 and 3%. You can also compare it with a 2-week prevalence rate of 8.1% estimated for depression among U.S. adults. Perhaps twice as many men as women experience gambling disorder. The average age at onset is the mid-20s to late 30s, but that's really misleading because it's a bimodal distribution, which I'll portray on the next slide, and also the age of onset interacts with gender. Men, has been discussed by a couple of the previous speakers, young men, men who are going to get gambling disorder get it younger, and women who are going to develop gambling disorder develop it later in life. Native American, Asian American, African American, and Hispanic American populations have been measured having greater prevalence than white Americans. So here's the portrayal of age and gender. It may be a little small, but if you can see it, you can make it a little bigger, I think. Maybe not. As has been discussed, the rates of young men developing gambling disorder in their teens and early 20s is the highest, where men are developing women are developing gambling disorder at much lower rates. Women develop gambling disorder at higher rates than men in their 40s and 50s. And you can see, right, the portrayal that the average is in the high 20s to mid 30s. Actually, that's a time when relatively few people are developing gambling disorder. It's the average of the men in their late teens and early 20s and women in their 40s and 50s. A few biological factors to consider. The corticostriatal limbic structures of the brain I've been implicated in the pathophysiology of gambling disorder, which importantly, those and related brain structures are also implicated in the biological functioning of substance use disorders. It's one of the reasons why gambling disorder is categorized with the substance use disorders. It's also interesting to note there is an established genetic component to gambling disorder. Twin studies where you compare identical twins who share all of their genes with fraternal twins who only share half of their genes suggest that somewhere from 35 to 54% of one's liability to develop gambling disorder is genetically inherited. Linking to specific brain regions, regions of the cortex, the surface of the brain where most of our conscious thought and other functions happen, the frontostriatal and limbic regions of the brain, including the striatum, orbitofrontal cortex, anterior cingulate cortex, the insula, the hippocampus, and the amygdala, providing a little substance, a little process for those. The medial prefrontal portions of the brain, the frontal lobe is responsible for most of the thinking, conscious, decision-making, social and emotional aspects of our mental life. The amygdala and the hippocampus are related to emotional processing, especially and managing stress. The insula and the medial orbitofrontal regions are those areas that are associated with reward and excitement sensitivity, the thrill of the win in gambling, as is commonly known, associated with dopamine release, is very active in the insula and medial orbitofrontal regions. So that's a little bit of the biology underlying the brain structure in gambling. I thought it would be useful to point out comorbidity or co-occurrence with other mental health disorders. People with gambling disorder, it's the rule rather than the exception that they also are experiencing other mental health issues. And so the percentages for each of these disorders here, this is out of people who have gambling disorder, what % of those also experience nicotine dependence, alcohol or drug dependence, et cetera. And you can see, I won't go through all of the numbers individually, but the rates are very high. And you might ask, well, how many people, regardless of their gambling status, experience nicotine dependence or alcohol dependence, et cetera? And the numbers vary for each of these disorders, but suffice for our purposes to say that for all of these disorders, the rates of each of these disorders among those with gambling disorder are considerably higher than the general population. And it includes all the substance use disorders. So gambling disorder is correlated with other substance use disorders, meaning somebody with a gambling disorder is more likely than somebody without a gambling disorder to experience the other substance use disorders and the impulse control disorders that are listed there, and the anxiety disorders, PTSD, phobia, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, and the mood disorders, depression and bipolar disorder. There is treatment available for gambling disorder. To put it realistically, one significant problem is that most people with gambling disorder don't seek treatment more than other disorders. Other disorders, people are more likely to identify that they have a problem and try to get help for it. Only about 10% of those with gambling disorder seek either professional treatment or self-help approaches such as Gamblers Anonymous. Those who seek treatment, treatment generally involves psychotherapy and talk therapy and/or pharmacotherapy. There are no medications that are approved for gambling disorder on its own, although with the very high comorbidity with other disorders, it's sometimes observed that medication that helps with one of the other disorders also contributes to reducing the gambling problems. Gamblers Anonymous is the single most common approach to addressing the problem. It's a 12-step program. As the name implies, it's modeled closely on Alcoholics Anonymous. Gamblers Anonymous is not a universal cure for gambling disorder. In fact, of those who begin with Gamblers Anonymous, only 8% remain engaged for a whole year and maintain the abstinence that is the goal of Gamblers Anonymous or GA programs, which is not to speak against that at all, because other treatment approaches also fall far short of successfully treating everybody. So if we have multiple approaches, each of which helps some people, then we have more chances to help the greatest number of people one way or the other. We know that Gamblers Anonymous plus one of the professional care modalities that we discussed is more effective for maintaining abstinence than Gamblers Anonymous alone. Cognitive or cognitive behavioral therapies are the most common and appear to be the most effective, with the cognitive portion often addressed to understanding probability, understanding risk, going directly at understanding the nature of bets and gambling and the reality of what you're likely to win or more likely to lose over time. There's a national 800 helpline available to everybody. And also it bears mentioning that about a third of all people who experience gambling disorder will also experience natural recovery, which means getting better, losing the symptoms of gambling disorder, even though you didn't do any of those things, it just goes away on its own. And then I included, and this is my last slide, a couple studies with opposing results on the impacts on mental health outcomes when casinos are opened in different localities. And you can see, these are 20-plus-year-old studies. One in Toronto found that there was an increase in some problem behaviors among those who lived near a casino. But then the 2002 paper found that gambling and gambling problems in the area did increase over at least 2 years. So those are my prepared remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dr. Goody. Any questions for Dr. Goody? Appreciate the information shared. All right, hearing none, thank you for being patient with us. We're going to keep trying to get on schedule here. Ryan is next. Ryan Ringsrud, excuse me. All right, we'll jump ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Chairman Powell. Chairman Powell, you good? Okay. You're on mute, I believe.
Thank you, Alan.
I'm good. I'm just sitting there. I'm looking at my face on there.
We can hear you now. Did you have a question, Chairman? All right, we'll come back to Chairman Powell. Neil Gerstenberger. Is Neil on? All right, Robin Barrow. Is Robin on?
I think Neil just got on. Lauren, can you admit Neil real quick? Can you let Neil in? Only one. If you want to tell Neil, I think he's probably good to go.
Neil, if you just joined, I believe.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Gerstenberger?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I just heard that. Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Yes, sir, we're here.
Yeah, great. Please, if you will, go ahead, and we're going to jump to you now.
Okay, great. I want to thank the study committee for giving us a few minutes to, let me put this here, turn this on, there we go. Thank the study committee for giving us a few minutes here to explain some of the process and requirements surrounding the background check process that will need to take place should a bill go forward. Representative Powell, I know, is all too familiar with this as we went through the trauma scene things and all the other bills that have been introduced in the past for sports betting. But in order for if the intent is to have a state and FBI finger-based background check performed, then there are some legal requirements that will have to be met and be in the statute. And one of those, it all falls under Federal Public Law 92-544, and that's where those requirements reside in order to have access to FBI CRI for licensing purposes. So one of the things that the criminal history information will have to turn back to a state agency authorized to receive that. And many of those bills in the past have had that criminal history record going back to the Georgia Lottery Corporation or some other non-governmental entity. And that's a challenge we've had. It has to go back to an agency like Department of Revenue or some other authorized state agency for that licensing. And then that state agency can then provide whoever the licensing authority or commission may be, yes, the applicant can be licensed, no, the applicant cannot be licensed. So that's one thing that's been a challenge as to where that the language that has always in the past had that record going back to a non-governmental agency. It must also identify the category of employees to be licensed or those licensees requiring that federal background check. And those must all be defined. In the past, some of those draft bills have had numerous categories, and some of those have been very broad. And the FBI has now provided some definitions that do comply with Public Law 92-544, and those can certainly be provided to any committee or subcommittee when the drafting takes place. The statute also has to require fingerprinting of these licensees for this as part of this federal background check process. So it has to require the fingerprinting as part of that screening process. And then there is also now required FBI language that must be in their processing language. Let's say those prints have to be sent to GBI. GBI will process those prints and then sent to the FBI for a national check. The results were returned back to the state, and the state then back to that authorized entity or agency. And one of the challenges we have now is that attorneys with the Office of Legislative Counsel or those who are drafting bills will cut and paste from statutes that already exist, and we have over 50 in Georgia that require state and FBI fingerprint-based background checks, but it's old language that the FBI will not approve. So that is why we want, I think, part of this is to say that we really need to work with any legislation, any whatever committees are drafting this to make sure that the class of applicants are defined properly, that they're not too broad, that there aren't too many, that the required language is in there, and that how it all returns. Unfortunately, the FBI does no longer review draft legislation. It used to be in the past we could send them draft legislation, they would review it, say, yeah, it looks good, no, it doesn't. They have discontinued that. So now we actually have to pass a bill, the governor sign it, and then send it to the FBI. And unfortunately, we had a couple now where the FBI's come back and said, no, that's not good. So even though we've looked at it and felt like it met all the requirements, it's up to the FBI. So now it actually has to be signed into law and then be sent up, and it has to come through us to go to the FBI. And then, as far as hearing back from the FBI, sometimes we get stuff back in 2 months, sometimes it's 6 or 8 months. Up until about a year ago, it was taking 2 and 3 years to get responses from the FBI. So they're trying to turn stuff around much quicker now. But there are a lot of challenges with drafting legislation from the employment and licensing perspective when you're talking about state and FBI finger-based criminal background checks, to make sure that language and that process meets FBI requirements. So we always ask that agencies or the legislature, whoever it may be, lets us know, let's look at it, because it's easier to make corrections on the front end, either before the legislature starts or at least while it's in session, so we can get stuff corrected before it's signed and sent to the FBI. So that's a very quick overview. Tried to be certainly respectful of everyone's time. This is something that can be discussed. I mean, there can be some long discussions on this, conversations. Are there any questions from the study committee?
Thank you, Neil. Any questions for the study committee? I don't hear any, but listen, I wanted to say I appreciate what you do, and we appreciate having you as a resource, and if things come up, we will certainly reach out.
Yes, sir, that'd be great. And like I said, please don't hesitate, because it's easier. We're here to help and try and get these things passed and hopefully passed in one legislative term. So,
well, and if
I have to come back.
And if we don't speak, I understand you might be retiring soon. So appreciate. Did I hear that
Yes,
correct?
sir. Tomorrow's my last day. Yes, sir. 39 years. So we're going to go do something else.
Well, we appreciate your service to the state, and certainly hope you enjoy some R&R.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you for being here.
And sir, I wasn't trying to cut it short, but trying to be respectful of people's times. And
I appreciate that. I appreciate that very much.
okay, all right, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Waving into staff.
All right, I think we're still working on getting Ryan back online, and or Robin. Is Robin online? We'll take a little 5-minute break, see if we can't get these on. If they don't get on in the next 5 minutes, we will be adjourning.
Still probably hot. Be careful, I think these are still probably hot.
All right, Ryan, I understand we might have you back online, and we're going to call back to order. Can you hear us, Ryan?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I can. Can you guys hear me?
I got you. Thank you so much. Sorry for whatever technological difficulties we're having, but go for it.
Yes, sir. And let me mute the broadcast I'm watching here so you guys don't hear feedback.
Okay.
Okay, I'm out. Yeah, sorry if the technological issues are on my end. I don't know what's going on, but I appreciate the opportunity to call in.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
All right. Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to present to your committee today. I'm excited to share with you guys information about DECAL and specifically how we utilize lottery funds to improve the lives of children and families in the state of Georgia. And keep in mind, I can't see the slides that you guys are seeing, so I'm going to do my best, okay? DECAL is responsible for overseeing the early education system in our state. Georgia is one of less than a dozen states with a standalone agency dedicated to early education. The first slide that I have shows our vision and our mission statement. Hopefully you guys can see that. And if you'll go to the next slide, it lists many of the programs and initiatives that DECAL administers. I'm not going to go into every one of the programs on this slide, but I do want to highlight a few for you guys. First is Georgia's pre-K program. You're going to be hearing a lot of information on Georgia's pre-K program today, as it's funded 100% by lottery funds. Georgia's pre-K program is our universal pre-K program for 4-year-olds to get students ready for kindergarten. The next DECAL program I want to highlight is our child care licensing division. DECAL is responsible for licensing and monitoring of all child care in the state of Georgia, and we do that to ensure the health and safety of children that are in child care settings. Next, I want to highlight our CAPS program. CAPS is Georgia's child care subsidy program, which subsidizes child care for eligible families while the parents either work or they might attend school or they might be volunteering, but they have to be in some kind of eligible activity for us to pay for part of their child care costs. And then the last program on this slide I want to highlight is our nutrition services program. This program provides access to high-quality, nutritious meals while children are in child care settings or while they are out of school for the summer. And if you guys can turn to the slide that is the pie chart, it should be the next slide on here. This slide shows a breakdown of DECAL's FY 2026 budget by fund source. DECAL's $1.2 billion budget is 49% federal funds, which is that big half blue slice you see on the pie, 45% lottery funds, and only 6% state general funds. We're going to spend most of this presentation talking about the yellow portion of the pie that you see that is state lottery funding. If you can go to the next slide, this slide is a line item breakdown of what DECAL does with that yellow slice of pie you saw on the previous slide. You can see from the top two lines of this table
that approximately 72% of the lottery funding we receive goes to pay teacher salary, teacher benefits, and the training and experience supplement for teachers in Georgia's pre-K classroom. The next line on this table is $114 million, and that's about another 20% that is spent on classroom level items such as supplies and materials, administrative costs, and other like startup grants that we provide to pre-K programs. They might have to buy furniture or technology or the curriculum that they're going to use to teach the children. So if you add those up that we've covered so far, that's 92% of the lottery funding we receive goes directly to the classroom level, either to teachers or to supplies, materials, and other administrative costs associated with the classroom. In addition, DECAL operates something we call the Summer Transition Program. This program operates during the summer months in an effort to provide students who need a little extra help in either preparing to rise from pre-K to kindergarten or to prepare for Georgia's pre-K program. The focus of our Summer Transition Program is largely on language, literacy, and math, and you're going to hear more about this later. The next line, DECAL is also in the process of reducing pre-K classroom size from 22 students down to 20 students. So that line, I believe you'll see on that slide, is about $14 million. Prior to the 2011 budget cuts, all the way back to the beginning of pre-K up to 2011, pre-K had 20 children per classroom. When we went through the 2011 budget cuts to reduce costs, we had to increase the class size to 22 students per classroom. And we're in year 2 of a 4-year plan to get our class size back to 20 students per classroom. To do that, we're adding around 90 to 100 classrooms each year to spread the number of students out into more classrooms so that by fiscal year 2028 or school year 2028, we will be back to 20 students per class. Lastly, DECAL spends about $14 million, which is about 3% of our lottery appropriation on our DECAL operations to administer and support Georgia's pre-K program. So if you'll go to the next slide, which should be a series of column charts, like 20 years worth of lottery appropriations. And so what this slide shows, it shows the last 20 years of what the General Assembly has done with the lottery dollars as far as appropriating them. You can see on this slide that from 2006 to 2026, lottery appropriations have doubled from around $812 million to over $1.6 billion in 2026. You can also see the breakdown of what those dollars go to. Again, I'm not looking at the slide. My memory is that the green is HOPE and the yellow is pre-K. The bigger portion on the top, which is about 2/3, goes to HOPE, and the kind of the smaller portion on the bottom, which is 1/3, goes to pre-K. However, it's not always 2/3, 1/3. DECAL's pre-K appropriation has varied from as low as 29% of total lottery appropriations, I think it was in 2023, to a high of 39% way back in 2008. This year, 2026, I believe we're kind of back to that 2/3, 1/3. We have a 66%, 34% split, where pre-K is getting about 1/3 of the lottery appropriation and HOPE is getting about 2/3 of the lottery appropriation. I think if you can jump 2 slides ahead, I'm going to shift to talking about the history, the characteristics, and the requirements of Georgia's pre-K program. So in 1992, the General Assembly passed the Lottery for Education Act. That same year, Georgia's pre-K program started, and in that year it was a pilot program serving 750 students. Since 1992, over 2 million children have been prepared for kindergarten in Georgia's pre-K program. This last school year, approximately 71,000 students were served in 3,786 classrooms statewide. In addition to those 71,000 students, we have about another 5,000 students, at-risk students, who were served during the summer months in our Summer Transition Program. If you go to the next slide, it shows 4 of the pillars or foundations for Georgia's pre-K program. The first is parent choice. Parents choose the program that best fits their needs. That's one of the pillars and something that's very important to us. You may have a family who wants to find the highest quality program close to their neighborhood or close to their community. You may have another family who wants to find a program that is close to their work that offers aftercare hours so that they can work till 5 o'clock even though the pre-K day ends at 2:30. And we think it's very important that parents be the ones to decide which program works for them. The next kind of pillar or foundation of Georgia's pre-K program is the public-private nature of Georgia's pre-K. Approximately half of our pre-K classrooms are located in public school systems. Think about a local elementary school in one of you guys' districts. You know, you think of it as K through 5. They may allocate 2 or 3 classrooms to be 4-year-old pre-K classrooms. The other half of Georgia's pre-K classrooms are located in private child care centers. So as you drive around your districts and you see private businesses that are child care centers, it may be a chain, it may be a local mom and pop place, they may have classrooms allocated to be Georgia pre-K classrooms where they only serve 4-year-olds that are in Georgia's pre-K program. The third kind of foundation or pillar of Georgia's pre-K program is the quality of the classroom and the quality of the experience for the children. DeKalb has approved curriculum which classrooms must select from, and DeKalb also supports those classrooms. We do visits, we help the teachers to make sure that we can ensure that the instruction the students are receiving is quality instruction. And the last pillar of Georgia's pre-K program is the universal nature of the program. If you are 4 years old and you sleep in the state of Georgia at night, you are eligible for Georgia's pre-K program, and that's why we call it a universal pre-K program. You guys can move ahead to the next slide. This slide shows what we call a saturation map of all 159 Georgia counties. And what you'll see on the shading on this map is the darker the county, the higher percentage of 4-year-olds we serve in one of Georgia's pre-K programs. So the darker blue shades that you see are closer to 100%. The lighter the lighter shades that are closer to white that you see will be closer to 0%. Statewide, we serve approximately 55% of the 4-year-old population in Georgia's pre-K program, and in 1/3 of Georgia's counties, we serve over 70% of the population in Georgia's pre-K program. If you guys will move ahead to the next slide, the National Institute for Early Educational Research, we call them NEAR for short. NEAR releases an annual publication every year called the State of Preschool Yearbook. In this yearbook, they evaluate states on 10 benchmarks that define a quality preschool program. Some of these benchmarks are listed on this slide, such as class size, the requirements for teachers to have credentials, and I'm happy to share with you guys that Georgia's pre-K program meets all 10 out of 10 of the NEAR benchmarks for a quality preschool program. If you'll go to the next slide, on the next 2 slides, I'm going to cover some of the requirements of the various stakeholders that are involved in Georgia's pre-K program. This first slide covers eligibility for the children. I kind of said this earlier. You must be 4 years old by September 1st of that school year, and you must reside in the state of Georgia. If you meet those 2 requirements, you are eligible as a child to participate in Georgia's pre-K program. For the grantee, which is the organization that we provide the funding to that operates Georgia's pre-K classroom, you must be one of 3 things. You must be a local school system, you must be a licensed child care center, or another type of federal or state regulated program. So think a college or university, a military base, maybe a Head Start program, but you have some other form of regulation from the federal or state government. So you must be one of those 3 things, and you must meet the health and safety standards and quality standards to make sure our kids are in a healthy setting, they're safe, and they're receiving quality instruction. On the next slide, it goes through some of Georgia's pre-K program's teacher requirements. The first requirement is that all pre-K classrooms must have a lead teacher and an assistant teacher, so 2 teachers per classroom who meet our credential requirements. So the credential requirements for lead teachers are that they have a minimum of a bachelor's degree in early childhood education, and assistant teachers must have either a child development associate or a Georgia paraprofessional certificate. The next slide, and what kind of the last thing I want to emphasize, is that significant research has been conducted on Georgia's pre-K program in its 25+ years of existence, including a longitudinal study that was done by the University of North Carolina over multiple years, where they followed a group of students who did and did not participate in Georgia's pre-K program and kind of tracked outcomes. And that research has shown consistently that children who attend a class in Georgia's pre-K program make significant gains across all domains of learning, and that they perform significantly better on 3rd grade end-of-year testing than students who did not attend the Georgia's pre-K program. So those are all my slides. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I just want to reiterate that DeKalb is very proud of Georgia's pre-K program. We take every effort to be good stewards of the lottery funding that's appropriated to us, and we work hard to ensure these funds have a positive impact on the children and families in Georgia. That concludes my presentation, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to take any questions your committee has.
Thank you so much, committee. I see one question already. Chairman Hatchett.
Thank you, Chairman Wiedauer. Ryan, On the slide for saturation rate, you show that darker counties are close to 100% saturated. That means in those counties that are close to 100%, you are serving almost all of the 4-year-olds in that county. Is that correct?
That is correct, and usually you're going to see that in the more rural counties where the population is really low and there's really not a lot of other options for 4-year-olds. So there's a couple counties in Georgia that literally there is no child care in that county, and so we may have 2 pre-K classrooms in an elementary school, and all of the children or most of the children from that county, the 4-year-olds, may be going to that pre-K classroom. But if you look in the larger counties in the metro areas, you're usually going to see lighter shades. And you get to the rural counties, you're going to see those darker shades. But you're reading it right, Chairman Hatchett.
So I would guess to say that most of our counties do have a waiting list, but it doesn't look like you have that many children on the waiting list. Does that just mean that you've got that many that aren't even trying to go to pre-K?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? It was cutting out.
So your slide shows 3,528 on a waiting list, but there's still,
yes, sir.
So based on your 55% eligible or going, there's still about 60,000 4-year-olds that aren't going. Where are those that aren't going, that aren't even trying to go?
So that's a really good question. You have to remember, not all families want to attend the Georgia's pre-K program. Some families keep their 4-year-old child at home. They don't attend any kind of child care. Some may attend a half-day church program. And so not all families, are looking for that Georgia's pre-K program experience. And so that's why you got that big delta between the waiting list only being 3,500 and this potentially quote-unquote unserved population of whatever that other 45% comes out to.
So one last question. Do you have to reside in the county or the city where the pre-K is, or can you, like if I live close to one county and they've got openings at the pre-K, and can I take my child to the other county's pre-K or other cities' pre-K? Do you?
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay.
That's back to that parental choice I talked about earlier.
So Ryan, kind of a follow-up question on that is, I guess, on the waiting list, maybe this is a different way to ask the question. On the waiting list of 3,500 students, where do those 3,500 reside?
So they could be anywhere in the state. I don't have that information with me offhand, but one way to think about it is you may have a child care center, say, somewhere in metro Atlanta, where they got a waiting list of 100 students who want to get into their pre-K, right? But then maybe they do a lottery and then they have 100 students who don't make it. Those students may go attend another pre-K, but they still show up on our waiting list. So that waiting list number is self-reported by pre-K programs around the state. So we always take that number with a little bit of a grain of salt.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Ryan, thank you for being here. Appreciate you working through the technical problems. Thank you.
Yeah, same to you guys. Thank you very much.
All right, the last person we have is Robin. Is Robin online? All right.
Yes.
All right, Ms. Barrow. Please go ahead. Thank you for joining us.
All right. I'm going to try really quickly to see if I can share my screen with you. Hopefully you guys can see that.
We are not seeing it.
All right. Well, good afternoon. Thank you for asking me to come and speak this afternoon. My name is Dr. Robin Barrow. I am currently the president of Georgia Quarter Horse Association. I've been on the board of directors and/or president of the association for the last 22 years. I also serve on AQHA's Animal Welfare Commission and Show Council. I am a member of the American Association of Equine Practitioners, and I myself am an equine veterinary practitioner here in the state for the last 25 years. So I hope I can bring a lot of different insights and perspective for you this afternoon. I'm sure you guys have already heard quite a bit about the recognized racing benefits to our equine community. What I'm showing you here on the screen is based on a 2017 American Horse Council study. So certainly these numbers have increased since that time. Direct economic impact to the U.S. economy is estimated at over $50 billion, with 1 million jobs created and $38 billion in wages, salaries, and benefits.
Ms. Barrow?
The indirect and probably often left out portion of that economic development is actually the indirect draw and tourism part of that. I know just inside of our horse shows that we put on at the Georgia International Horse Park in Conyers, we estimate that we have a single horse show that brings in somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 million in revenue for the local economy just in that small 10-day horse show. So nationwide, it's estimated that that creates 1.7 million jobs in outside tourism type industries and 122 billion in revenue and wages and benefits for that group.
Ms. Barrow.
As far as the community here in Georgia, I think there's a lot of things that racing could benefit us. It would allow us to invest in agriculture and land preservation, and I think, you know, as we become a more industrial nation, we are losing so much of the heartland that is important for us to be able to continue to have livestock and support the industry that's out there. And I think a lot of times we don't necessarily think of horses as being necessary to that industry, but they are an integral part of what we still use on a daily basis to be able to work cattle, to be able to work farms. Especially our friends in the western United States. Racing also serves as an important driver for veterinary research, something near and dear to my heart. It's not just research, though, that's based on racehorses. That research has benefited us in areas of vaccination protocols, deworming protocols, orthopedic repair, certainly pushed us down the road of regenerative medicine techniques. For the horses that we see outside of the racing industry. It also supports a lot of local jobs and businesses. It creates a lot of variety of employment opportunities. Certainly myself as a veterinarian, trainer, stable staff, breeders, farriers, so many other people that are involved in the industry. And that becomes a real cyclic type of environment, right? So the more horses we have, the more veterinarians we need, and then the more horses we create, right? And then again, the more veterinarians we need. So it really starts to bolster our current equine community here in the state, really gives us a lot more opportunity to expand and grow and bring in new opportunities for our horse owners in all those respects. So that's kind of an overview as far as kind of what we see from the economic part of it as far as GQHA, but to be more specific to racing and to AQHA and GQHA and what our roles are inside of the state. First, I just want to share with you our mission statement as far as racing goes, and really for our entire organization. That mission statement says that we are here to ensure the American quarter horse is treated with dignity, respect, and compassion at all times. And certainly it's something we take very seriously in the racing industry. We know that racing can get a black eye, but we're here to be more than that black eye inside of that environment. Currently, AQHA has a membership of over 230,000 people and over 6 million registered horses, making us the largest breed organization in the United States and the world. Georgia Quarter Horse has a current membership of over 3,200 people and over 42,000 registered horses in the state. We hold over 20 horse shows a year, including the 5th largest show in the United States in Conyers, Georgia in July. I put just a little link there at the bottom of the presentation. Certainly go and look at all of our information on AQHA.com about what we perceive to be the importance of horse racing and our stances on a lot of different items. AQHA and Georgia Quarter Horse Association strongly support efforts to improve racing and welfare of the horse. We feel like that is done on several levels, that we help provide assistance, funding, and background material to. We believe that educating owners, breeders, and trainers helps us to create a better equine environment for our friends. We also are strong supporters of the improved governance, testing, and stewardship at all of our tracks for all of our horse shows. We really kind of even outstrip the USEF, the United States Equestrian Foundation, as far as what we require for testing and stewardship for all of our horses. We're also very involved in funding of research and investigators, both at the state level and at the AQHA level. GQHA is a longtime supporter of the AQHA Foundation, where we fund several research projects specific to our equine industry. Legalized racing is central to this effort. Without the oversight of legalized racing, the welfare of the horse is compromised, our breed integrity cannot be maintained, and the court of public opinion levies their disapproval. With nobody watching the chicken house, so to speak, we become targets. Our horses become targets of bad behaviors and bad players in the industry. And we strongly support the thought of legalized racing to help support their welfare. Currently in Georgia, with a black hole of not being able to race horses legally and sanctioned with pari-mutuel wagering, what we see inside of the state is illegal bush track racing. It is unsanctioned, illegal, and unregulated horse racing inside of our state. Currently, there are 89 tracks across the United States. One of the largest tracks in the country is actually located here in Georgia. That's the Rancho El Centenario in Milner. There was also a large track in Gillsville that I'm not clear as to whether it is still currently operating. Both of those locations have had several pending lawsuits and criminal indictments currently against them. The Rancho El Centenario in Milner was of a 2022 expose by the Washington Post and PETA. I've attached that link where you can go and read that article. At that facility, which is run by, I believe, an ex-district attorney for the county there, they are not only profiting by illegal wagering, admission fees, alcohol sales, and cartel involvement. They're charging over $100 per person admission. This is all unregulated bush track racing that's happening right here in Georgia without us having any ability to control it. There have been deaths. There was a jockey, a pretty famous, well-known AQHA jockey that was killed in an accident there. There have been several horses that have been reported to have been killed or severely injured during the meets and the races there in Milner. Lots of reports of animal abuse. They're using electrocution devices to be able to run those horses on the tracks because there's no rules. Completely unfettered access for these guys to win at all cost, including doping with methamphetamines, anabolic steroids, cocaine, and many, many other drugs. You would be amazed at what people will use and will put in a horse to be able to get it to run just a little bit faster. And of course, the driver for all of this is not the welfare of the horse, right, but the actual intake at the gate and the intake of illegal betting on these horses when they're there. AQHA and GQHA are concerned about these tracks because it really forces a lot of problems with our breed integrity. There's no way for us to track bloodlines and to ensure continuation of quality for those animals with people that are, taking these horses out of sanctioned tracks and moving them to these Bush League tracks. And what we're seeing is that we have a market decline from that, from us being able, AQHA, GQHA members, being able to sell our horses because we fear that those horses may end up on a bush track somewhere. There was a really famous horse in 2023 that made over $1 million in a year racing as a 2-year-old on sanctioned tracks in Texas and Oklahoma. That horse was sold, didn't know where it ended up, and all of a sudden appeared here in Milner, Georgia, racing there, increased his gate intake because everybody wanted to go see this horse. So we as an industry don't want to see our horses end up in these Bush League, Bush track type setups where we can't control them. The other thing that we're seeing is as a breed, we're also trying to ensure integrity by when we have bad players, we kick them out. Jockeys, trainers, horses that have problems that shouldn't be running on a track for particular genetic issues, they're not welcome on our sanctioned tracks. And so I know you guys are very familiar. Bob Baffert, thoroughbred trainer that was sanctioned over the last 3 or 4 years, hasn't really been able to race on the thoroughbred side. We do the same thing on the AQHA side, and we feel really strongly that when we have bad behaviors, they shouldn't be allowed to continue to risk jockeys, horse welfare, or really to just endanger our industry as a whole, right? Horse racing is front and center for the equine industry, and horse racing gives all of us in the equine industry, when it's not done correctly and it's not treated with the dignity and respect that it deserves, it gives all of us in the equine industry a black eye. And that's certainly not what we're looking for here in Georgia. The other thing that we, would raise concerns about with these bush tracks is that there's certainly significant equine health concerns, both on a national level and for us here in Georgia, a pretty significant infectious disease problem. Equine infectious anemia, also known as a Coggins test, EIA, has been a federally surveilled program since the 1950s. Equine infectious anemia has no cause. If you have a horse with equine infectious anemia, it has to be put down. Piroplasmosis, we are actually a piroplasmosis-free country currently, but it is rampant in Mexico and south of the border. Both of those have seen huge increases in the areas that promote bush track racing, threatening our status to be a piroplasmosis-free country. And then economically, really putting us to the screws with the potential of increasing equine infectious anemia in our area. So both of those are diseases that we treat by euthanasia. That is the proper protocol. And when you look at these areas where these bush tracks are, we have a significant increase in those diseases in our horse population. The reason is that these guys are reusing unsanitized equipment. So they're reusing needles, they're reusing equipment on their horses. And so you have one horse that maybe snuck over the southern border with piroplasmosis or EIA, and the next thing you know, you've got 20 or 30 or 40 horses at the track that have been infected. From a professional standpoint, for me, I had to assist the USDA in a group of horses that were piroplasmosis positive about 20 minutes from my practice in Covington, Georgia. And all of those horses had to be euthanized because they were piroplasmosis positive, and all could be traced back to bush track racing. There's certainly a lot of improper use of medications, both legal and illegal medications, right? All of those can be misused and are inside of that bush track group. And then I think the other thing that we have to remember is what happens to these guys when they make it out. What happens with the post-racing career and overpopulation of these horses in our area, because the guys that are racing down there don't really care about what the long term is for them. So kind of what is our position on what we can do and what needs to be done here in the state for us to be able to support legalization of racing? We believe it should be legalized in the state. It would significantly improve the welfare of our horse and our ability to care for them. We would also strongly support the creation of a Georgia Racing Authority in conjunction with AQHA and the Jockey Club. Every state has a racing authority. We will have to have a racing authority inside of the state of Georgia to be able to comply with HISA racing standards, currently federally legislated HISA standards that are out there. So we would definitely have to have a racing authority to come up with our own rules and regulations, as well as be able to comply with the federally mandated program. The other thing, and the lastly, what I'd leave you with is we feel strongly about the fact that horse racing would improve the equine industry in the state. However, that is with an asterisk. Currently in the state of Georgia, there's really not a good existing model for animal/equine welfare. Our equine impound facilities were defunded probably 10 years ago now. We have no way for our inspectors or people that have concerns with animal welfare or equine welfare inside of our state to be able to find resources and potentially be able to criminally litigate those horses in court. So, you know, I know there's probably been a lot of discussion on here about, you know, gambling and what it creates in the community and all of those things, but we also want you guys to be aware that it also will create some ability for us, hopefully, for the legislator to find in their ability to fund some of these equine associated programs that have fallen by the wayside over the last 10 to 15 years. Currently, if you go see a horse that has no ability to impound horses that are being neglected. So as a veterinarian, I have to walk away from that situation and hope that the county has some resource for that, but I can tell you the counties have very little resource to be able to deal with those. So I would strongly encourage us, right, if we move forward with looking at legalizing racing, and we create the Georgia Racing Authority, I would strongly encourage us to take some of the funding, a very small amount, and be able to give back to the equine community in that way. And with that, I will say thank you and can take any questions if you all have any. Hello?
Now, can you hear me now? Any questions for the committee? All right, Ms. Bear, if you can hear us, thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate you being here.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you. Before we close, any comments from anybody in the public, anybody in the audience? All right, we will have a date very soon. I need to get with Brian here, make sure our schedules mesh, but it will be sooner than later. Mid-October is what I'm hoping. So with that, I appreciate everybody's attendance, appreciate all the presenters and the time we're putting into this. Everybody travel safely. We'll see you soon. Meeting adjourned.